Welcome to the Vault XL. Happy Saturday, everyone. This commentary is pertaining to Kevin Frankie, Rubi Frankie, Jody Hildebrandt, a third person who's been brought into this debacle. Pam Botcher, do not know what her role is or was. What was her role? Did she know about the abuse of the said children? And 115 bodies have been found in a Colorado crematorium. That is my subject matter for this Saturday afternoon. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $BigAngie129 Cash App, stickers and chats are always welcome during the live stream. Before I get into my two-part commentary, I want to bring you two brief updates. An arrest warrant has been issued for a suspect in the killing of a Philadelphia journalist, Josh Kruger. So a manhunt is underway, and I do believe this is an African-American male that they are searching for. And more crazy nonsense pertaining to Lori Vallow Daybell. She and her legal team have filed an amended appeal citing 16 issues of her conviction. Very pathetic situation. You would think a person would just come to grips with what they have done and just do their time in prison instead of using people to do footwork and filing paperwork and documents and trying to get court hearings when you can just do your time. Lori Vallow, you know what you and Chad and your brother and your niece and also his wife, you all have conspired together to kill those kids and husbands and wives, and the attempted murder of your niece's husband. Why not just do your time instead of wasting all this court time and dredging up what would be considered horrible memories for those involved, relatives and friends of the victims, because they have to live every day with what you have done to the children. Mrs. Daybell, your husband, your first husband, your last husband. Just stop it. Let's start with my Colorado story. This is some very disturbing information, and I'm also going to play a little, some content pertaining to alternative ways of burying people. You can weigh in on what you think. I've posted the videos to my community page. Give me your theories on these other alternative ways in burying the dead, because the standard way of burying the dead is either by casket or box into the ground and or cremation. But there are some other alternatives that are brewing out in Colorado, and I'm going to play you that content after this audio. Thank you for joining me.
Well, right now, FBI teams are on their way to a small town in Colorado where 115 bodies were discovered. Investigators say they were improperly stored in a building belonging to a funeral home.
Yeah, the scene, they say, could be so hazardous the building's been sealed off before investigators can actually take a closer look. Fox 31's Vicente Arenas has more from Penrose.
For much of this afternoon, people have been coming to this area to look at this building where 115 bodies have been discovered. Many asking, how could something like this happen here? At the center of the investigation is this building in Penrose that investigators say is owned by the Return to Nature Funeral Home. 115 bodies discovered improperly stored here, according to investigators, but it's not clear if a crime was committed. FBI teams that worked at the site of the 9/11 attacks and major plane crashes now coming here to try and figure out what happened.
I think we all have the same questions. Who specifically was impacted by this? How many were impacted? Who's responsible, and why did it happen?
Residents began smelling a stench in the area. The discovery was made after some kind of suspicious incident here Tuesday night. Jeanette Cantor is having a hard time believing what happened next to the post office she visits every week.
Shocked. Just disbelief. This is such a small, sleepy town that You don't think that stuff like this is going to happen?
Penrose is a small town. A main road goes through the center of it, small stores, and a smattering of homes on each side. In this town of 3,000, the funeral home that owns the building said on its website that it offered green funerals and burial of bodies that were not embalmed. What was found here has people asking a lot of questions.
First of all, it was sadness. Like, I can imagine what their families are going through. It's unimaginable.
The Fremont sheriff says the building's too hazardous to enter and would not describe what first responders saw. The wait begins now for teams of forensic experts to untangle a discovery that has left a small community horrified. The sheriff today said no arrests have been made in this case, and the governor has issued a disaster declaration. In Penrose, Vicente Arenas, Fox 31.
All right, everybody. That's news coming out of Colorado. Let's see what some of the pilgrims have to say about this very sick scenario. So far, in the last couple of years, there have been several funeral homes cited for improper storage of bodies. This is by someone commenting on the page. I agree. I've been hearing of a lot of those stories. I remember hearing of a story up in Chicago, and this is around the time when my mother passed away in September 2014. Storing bodies, holding them, some would say hostage, or is it nobody was coming to take care of the business of the people in the funeral home? And that happens a lot. A funeral home gets a body and they're waiting on the arrangements from the family, which is basically payment, so the funeral can go forward. And a lot of people don't have the money right away to have the funeral services go forward. So therefore, the body is just lying at the funeral home. And a few years ago, I brought you a story of it was a young lady who was in a funeral home, wasn't in the best shape. I believe it was out of New York. And she wasn't in the best shape for viewing. And that's the point. Embalmed or not, the dead has to be put down. It's just the way it is. And if a body is not embalmed, then I think you know the rest. It's going to deteriorate faster. That's the whole purpose of embalmment. Let's get a little more information pertaining to this Colorado crematorium. Penrose, Colorado. 3,000 residents. So that's very, very small. Neighbors complaining about a smell. Incident transpired on Tuesday, which I'm assuming was a few days ago. So what happened? How many people knew about the bodies in the building? The funeral home owns the building. How long have they owned the building? How long were the bodies stored in the building? How many complaints have gone in to the city about the smell? And really, what was the jump off on Tuesday to get investigators involved to go to this place? You hear in this commentary that first responders saw something, which I'm assuming the bodies. Are we going to hear that they weren't stored properly? When I mean stored properly, I mean they weren't in bags, they weren't in boxes, they were in a manner that's disrespectful to the dead. Just laying out. No specific order, no, you understand what I'm saying? Was there tags, identification to know who was who? Because if you're supposed to be burying these people, then there had to be some type of order in burying them. What did the first responders see? The governor has declared this a disaster area. Imagine that. Small town of 3,000 people. And the governor has declared this building a hazard to the community. And will there be ramifications? Because as you've heard, many funeral homes have been cited for improperly storing bodies, either the crematorium and or a funeral home. And there has been no jail time, no prison time. And you see this often. You also see this with animals, and they're alive. People mistreat animals and they get no jail time, which I find very strange, because you will jail a human for abusing another human, elderly, disabled adult, or child, but you won't give jail time to someone who disrespects an animal, stores animal, hoard animals, torture animals. I don't understand. So now we have the dead, and this is some alternative way in burying the dead. And I can only imagine what they saw, because the fact that they said they're not going to tell you what the first responders first saw when they got on the scene, that sounds bad, very bad. So that's what I'm asking. How were the bodies stored? Were they in bags, on tables, appropriate type tables that you have like at the morgue and the funeral home? Or they were just thrown about in a room or rooms? Because you're talking about 115 bodies. And the fact that somebody was complaining or more about smells, that should be an indicator they weren't properly stored. They were just lying about in a room or more. So how many rooms were the bodies in? One big room? What's the square footage of the building? Were they in different rooms? How were they stored? I think we're going to find out. It's horrific. Let's get some information. Thank you for joining me. Takes all kinds. We're living in some desolate times. Every day, the stories get worse by the moment. #21 viewing. Thank you for joining me this Saturday. Associated Press is the source. Police said Friday they have found at least 115 bodies at a Colorado Green funeral home under investigation for improper handling of remains. The awful smell seeped from a neglected building in a small Colorado town for days, followed by a report that made police take a closer look at the Green funeral operator's storage facility. Inside, they made a gruesome discovery at least 115 decaying bodies. Investigators were tight-lipped Friday about exactly what they found inside the Return to Nature funeral home in Penrose, Colorado. But their plans to bring in teams that usually deal with airline crashes, coroners from nearby jurisdictions, and the FBI pointed to a grim mess. A state document, meanwhile, alleged funeral home owner John Halford tried to conceal the improper storage of corpses. He claimed he was doing taxidermy at the facility, according to the state suspension letter dated Thursday. Now, let me repeat that. This is his commentary to officials. He was doing taxidermy. And we know that taxidermy is pertaining to animals, not humans. Very disrespectful. Halford acknowledged that he had a problem at the property. The Colorado Office of Funeral Home and Crematorium Registration letter said the document did not elaborate on the taxidermy and alleged improper storage of remains, but the facility's registration has been expired since November. Well, now, November would mean November of 22, because we're just in October of 23. So you're talking about almost a year that he had registration expired. This is bad. No one had been arrested or charged. Text messages to the funeral home seeking comment went unanswered. No one at the business picked up the phone, and there was no working voicemail. Funeral home officials were cooperating as investigators sought to determine any criminal wrongdoing. Fremont County Sheriff Alan Cooper said at a news conference where he called the scene inside the building horrific. This is exactly what I had just said. What did the first responders see when they entered the building? And now we have the sheriff, Mr. Cooper, saying that inside the building, horrific, and it's in quotations. On Friday, a sour, rotten stench still came from the back of the building where windows were broken. Very interesting. Now, who broke the windows? Law enforcement to get into the building, or they were broken before law enforcement got there. Coroner's officials from Fremont County and nearby El Paso County parked their trucks outside and discussed among themselves as they walked around the building. Some identifications would require taking fingerprints, finding medical or dental records, and DNA testing in a process that could take several months. Fremont County Coroner Randy Keller said families would be notified as soon as possible after body identification. He added, family members who have used the funeral home were asked to contact investigators. That's another thing that I'd like to iterate. When you say doing fingerprints and all of that, you got to ask the obvious question. Well, how did he get the bodies? Because he is a funeral home owner. He owns this building. I'm assuming this building is a separate entity from the actual funeral home. So how far away is the funeral home to this building? That's what you have to ask. How far away are the two entities? And how in the world law enforcement and city officials didn't see or hear anything about this building if neighbors were complaining about the smell? See, I always say ask the pertinent questions because the answer is always at the beginning of the story. And the beginning of the story is somebody knew about him being in there. He's lost his registration coming up now almost a year. The smell is horrific. So anybody with sense, if you're walking or driving, you smell something. What do you usually do? You look over. You look to your left, you look to your right to left. So if I'm walking by the building or driving by the building, wouldn't I say, damn, there's something in that building? So in a town of 3,000, you want me to believe nobody knew something in there was not alive? This makes no sense. As the news broke, Mary Simmons, 47, couldn't help but wonder if her husband was inside the building. Darrell Simons had lung cancer and died of pneumonia in August. A few months shy of their 13th anniversary, Mary Simons hired Return to Nature Funeral Home to cremate him, but the ashes never arrived. Sitting in the rocking chairs that Simons and her husband spent long hours in at their home in nearby Florence, Colorado, she remembered him proposing to her by sliding on his knees and popping open a box with a rock inside in the small pond he built with a trickle of water to calm her anxiety. She finally begun to turn the corner of grieving, she said. Suddenly, it's like, oh my God, I've lost him all over again, Simon said through tears. It's like the grieving process is starting all over again. Well, he just died in August. I would assume that most people would probably still be grieving someone. It's just October. I'm just saying. Police told Simons the process of finding out whether her husband's body was in the building would be slow, she said. The FBI was bringing in teams with additional training and specialized equipment that processed scenes of national magnitude, such as major airline disasters, Denver-based FBI Special Agent in Charge Mark Michalik said. The bodies were inside a 2,500 square foot, 230 square meter building with the appearance and dimensions of a standard one-story home. The funeral performed burials without embalming chemicals or metal caskets. Let me repeat that. The funeral performed burials without embalming chemicals or metal caskets using biodegradable caskets shrouds or nothing at all, according to its website. The company charged $18.95 for a natural burial, not counting a casket or cemetery space, and until July offered cremations too. Under Colorado law, green burials are legal, but state code requires that anybody not buried within 24 hours must be properly refrigerated. Deputies were called in Tuesday night in reference to a suspicious incident officials haven't yet described. Fremont County Sheriff's Office investigators returned the next day with the search warrant and found the remains. So that would have been on Wednesday then. So why did they say Friday? So I'm confused. So Tuesday night, something happened suspicious. They said they returned the next day with a search warrant and found the remains. So that would have been Wednesday. Joyce Pavetti, 73, could see the funeral home from the stoop of her house and said she caught whiffs of a putrid smell in the past few weeks. We just assumed it was a dead animal, she said. Associated Press writers Amy Beth Hansen of Helena, Montana, Meade Groover of Cheyenne, Wyoming, Matthew Brown of Billings, Montana, and news researcher Jennifer Ferrari, New York, contributed to this story. Okay. What in the world did I just read? Penrose, Colorado. Let's chop this story up. 115 bodies. I guess the story got out Friday, but the bodies were found Wednesday. Incident on Tuesday. So what was the incident? Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado. The owner is named John Halford. He claimed he was doing taxidermy at the facility. The state suspended letter dated Thursday. So he's been, I don't understand what I'm reading. So the state gave information pertaining to what he told them he was using the building for. He acknowledged he had a problem at the property. And this is according to the Colorado Office of Funeral Home and Crematory Registration. This is on a letter. The document did not elaborate on the taxidermy and alleged improper storage of remains, but the facility's registration has been expired since November. There's your problem right there. Hello, Dawn. Thank you for joining me. Hello, Miss Alley Cat. You have a facility of expired registration. So now let's ask that question. Why was the registration expired? I'd like to know. Why would you not renew the paperwork, Mr. Halford? The scary part should be the obvious. It's that he owns a funeral home somewhere in his town or nearby, and people trusted him to bury their deceased, whether it be a cremation or a regular burial. That's where we have the problem here. He owns a funeral home. The funeral home owned the building. The building hasn't been registered in almost a year. Why? Why did he not renew the registration? He tells this board, well, yeah, I got a problem. What do you mean you have a problem? Oh, you got a big, big problem. Kind of like 115 dead problems. How about that? People in the community smell the odor. One neighbor thought it was just a dead animal. But you should know at some point, a dead animal, the smell is going to die down. Kind of like riding by the highway. Let's say you go past, I'll use for instance, I drive down a certain road, a deer was hit. Naturally, I'm going to smell the odor. But at some point, if I'm going by this road once a week, week for week, the smell is going to die down. So somebody says the smell is going on for weeks. So common sense should tell you, hello, Penton, you have more than just a dead animal problem. Because as I said, at some point, if you hit a dog, a deer, yeah, it's going to smell. I'm not here to, say how long it's going to smell, but at some point, the smell is going to, I would think, dissipate or be, not as heavy. So who knew about the building? Who knew what was inside of the building? Dear God, what was the incident that happened on Tuesday? I am scared to even ask. What in the hell popped off on Tuesday of this week to get investigators over there to find this grim discovery? I don't even want to use my imagination of what was found or what happened on Tuesday. So let's ask, Mr. Halford, the facility. Were the doors secured to the facility? Could anybody just make their way in? Because they said windows were broken. So I don't know if this were windows broken by the authorities trying to get in, to get way in. Did you have it alarm system on the building? Did you have chain link locks? And what was on it? Padlocks? How long have you had this building? How long have you been using this facility for this alleged taxidermy? I think you said taxidermy because you knew if you had said, I just got some dead bodies in there and I became overwhelmed with no help and I neglected them, you already knew the bang was going to come. The bang is going to come anyway because you're not going to be able to logically explain 115 bodies. That means you've gotten money for the 115. Stay woke because you do own a funeral service. And what's going to be bad is that there are at least half of 115 persons waiting on urns and remains to put in urns. A crematory. So was this more of a crematorium service? I don't understand. Because it says you did cremations as well. Is this a matter of you didn't have proper help to take the bodies to where they needed to go? So now we got to ask that question. Where is it that the bodies were supposed to go? Because they couldn't stay in there, in a building. I'm confused. So, Mr. Hoffer, where were you supposed to be taking the bodies? The name of the company is Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado. But it says the bodies were found in the funeral home. So I thought this was going to be like a separate building. I am utterly confused. Let me repeat. Investigators were tight-lipped Friday about exactly what they found inside the Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado. But their plans to bring in teams that usually deal with airline crashes, coroners from nearby jurisdictions, and the FBI pointed to a grim mess. That's why you have to reread. So it is the funeral home. So now when I hear somebody say, well, I thought it was a dead body, think about what you're saying. You only have 3,000 people living in the town. I doubt that you have a lot of traffic in this town of 3,000, unless it's one of those towns that passes through another one, which, that's any town. But make it make sense. This is a funeral home. So what did I just say earlier? If I'm walking by a building, a house, a structure, no matter what it is, a barn, and I smell something that I know don't smell right, I'm going to use deduction. Oh, that smells like death. So if I'm walking by a funeral home, wouldn't I use deduction to say something ain't right in there? I'm going to say it again. Something ain't right in there. You know, you're not walking by a meat company You're not walking by a meat company. You're driving by a funeral home. So I had to reread that because I was thinking the places were separate, that he had actually a funeral home and then this place. But no, this is this nature place. So I'm going to ask again, if this is the funeral home, now this is worse than me thinking there were two separate buildings. Because now this would be a place, if you chose, to have your loved one buried in an alternative manner, and you're using Mr. Hofford's services, a town of 3,000, where are my mathematicians? 3,000 people, and you have 115 bodies. I'm going to let you just sit on that for just a second. So how many bodies were there longer than a month or more? Because one lady said she's been waiting on, I would assume, ashes since August. And Colorado law says if you use this alternative method, the body has to be put down within 24 hours. So that means you got to have the money ready if you decide to use this service, this company. That's less than what, $2,000. This is bad. Because I'm assuming if this is a funeral home building, I don't even know what I'm saying right now. Several people and possibly other counties have used this service how many were supposed to get remains back as far as cremations? How many bodies were in the room out of the 115 were supposed to be cremations, first and foremost? Number two, how many bodies were in there that hadn't yet been paid for to go forward with a funeral service? Because it says it's a funeral home. So I'm assuming they do this alternative burial, cremations, and then I would assume regular funeral services. I don't know. Because that's where I'm confused. I'm confused. When you go in the comment section below this article in the Newsbreak app, Miss Taylor says, hold on. We don't taxidermy humans. 115 bodies were found. He was claiming taxidermy in that building. How is everyone missing this? Someone from Boston responded, no one is missing the point. It's just that no one cares. Just make the smell go away. So she replies, that's really ignorant. Mentally ill people are everywhere and you don't want to help. Just make it go away. That's the American Christian way of thinking. Somebody else replied, thought the same thing. Oh my God, says Not Your Mama. I feel so bad for the families that find out their loved ones are just thrown out in the back sheet of building. Why hasn't this person been arrested? Archie has the best comment so far. I have to ask a couple of questions. Number one, where did you think the bodies were going? Thank you. That's exactly what I had asked. Because in the beginning, I misread it being the main funeral home building. So his question is spot on. Thank you, Archie Bennett, wherever you are. Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. Where did you think the bodies were going when you went to Mr. Hoffer for the services? Oh my goodness. Where did you think your loved one was going to be going? Okay. He advertised that he was not using embalming or was using nothing at all. Number 2, they think that these bodies were not just thrown somewhere to rot? Number 3, did the customers pay for a plot or tell him to dispose of the bodies responsibly? Number 4, when cremation stopped suddenly in July, did anyone stop to think the very expensive machine may have broken down? Or how did you call in a repairman when you have embalmed carcasses, oh my God, around in storage? Number 5, when you look for the cheapest by far alternative, did you expect to get anything other than that? Number 6, why did this woman not give a SHIT emoji about her husband for at least 3 months until he may be in a building full of his tree-hugging buddies melting into a black puddle as you asked for? And then it's got the oh my gosh emoji. Archie says number 7, he had to continue. Why would anyone ask a cut rate facility that specializes in ignoring embalming to cremate a loved one, then not inquire about the lack of return of ashes in anything more than 3 days? Even with refrigeration, I wouldn't keep ground beef in an open container for more than 3 months. Finally, to answer your question, to number 1, the popo needed to determine what to charge him with. Number 2, if this guy supplied everything he charged for minus the broken crematorium, waiting on parts or replacement? Question mark 3 times. Current supply chain is tenuous at best. Then the only folks that did not do their job was the state funeral inspections department. These people got exactly what they paid for and therefore asked for not very much. Ooh, Lord, have mercy. But then someone said to Mr. Archie, Miss Molly Morrison of Texas said, but it wasn't cheap. The article said they charged $1,800 for burial, not including the plot or the casket. Yes, I read that. Deborah says, I don't think they know how to arrest at this time, but I'm sure when they find him or them, they will be arrested. Then somebody says, you don't embalming someone who's going to be cremated. It's one or the other. Exactly. Somebody from Knoxville says, Miss Dean, disgusting. No matter how you look at it, where did the families think the bodies went to? I guess that I'm not getting exactly what is going on. So somebody says, green burials with no preservatives, rotting, no other option. That's Archie, who's been doing most of the commenting. So then Archie says to Jill, yep, what do you think when the crematorium breaks down? Especially if you are way cheaper than your competitors. I'm not making excuses or saying this is right, but what exactly did they expect? Lord have mercy. They've got a winded dialogue in this article. He has a lot of relevant questions. What did you expect for the $1,800? And as someone has said, I believe below the video on YouTube, the news video, $1,800 is still a lot of money to some, and it's still more than a couple of $100, which is charged for cremation. Usually cremation is about $300 to $500, depending on where you live. So $1,800 is still way more money. And in the end, it all depends on your pocketbook when it comes to the embalming process and funeral services and the casket and all of that. Naturally, in a town of 3,000, you would assume this is probably a rural area in Colorado. The people are not very wealthy and well off. So he offered this service allegedly obliged these people with a service. They thought possibly, as you say, a cut rate to bury them. I'm assuming he told them on the website and the flyer, however it goes, this is what we do and don't do. But what they weren't expecting was for the bodies to be piled up in a storage building or funeral home. Because at this point, it's a storage building, not a funeral home. And that's why I said there's more to the story. As someone in this article says, what about the state? You have an obligation to check a facility out. The fact that he didn't renew his registration should have told you something. You should have sent a inspector over, a state inspector, immediately from the Crematorium Funeral Home Board, state board. Well, why is this man not renewing his paperwork? He's a funeral home. No matter how he's advertising of burying the dead, disposing of the dead, why are his papers not registered? That's first and foremost. Number two, people are smelling a stench in this small area. Somebody should have known something ain't right. Was there an altercation at the crematorium or this funeral home? Did somebody go over there inquiring about their loved one, been trying to get a hold of this man? The news here says no answer, no voicemail. So did somebody go over there to the building and say, I'm trying to see what the hell is going on with my loved one? There was an altercation, vandalism. What are we talking about? Maybe that's where the broken windows come from. Somebody broke the windows out because they're upset and was pissed off. They weren't getting an answer from this man. Naturally, you would have smelled death when you went over there to inquire. So as some of these people are saying in this article, to the lady whose husband just died in August, did you ever go over to the funeral home, ma'am, to inquire about your husband's remains? Hey, why am I not getting his remains? Hey, what's taking too long? Because it's just like anything. You could call, because we live in an automated world now. Automation and apps. There comes a point when you have to get up off your rump and go over to the business itself. So let's say she used this service and she's a county over, 2 counties over. I don't know. Well, you better get in your car or get a ride over there to see what's going on. I think that's what happened Tuesday. Somebody's been trying to reach out to Mr. Halford, couldn't get an answer, and they moseyed their tail on over there to this facility, and something popped off. What? I don't know, because they're not saying. But that's what got the ball rolling to where this is now a national story. 115 bodies. And I'm assuming in deplorable conditions, because naturally the bodies are not embalmed, whether you were using a casket or not. And as some of the people are saying in the article, where did you think the bodies were going if you weren't going to get the bodies cremated? Very good question. Very good question. And why would you not want the body embalmed? I'm asking that. Especially if you are the type who don't have the funds to bury a person, but you want an actual funeral service. You don't have all the money, so you got to come up with the money to pay the funeral service. So let's ask Mr. Halford, exactly what did you offer? Sir, what did you offer? Because I am eerily confused. Let me do a little background. Hello, everybody in the chat. Because this is bad. This is real bad. There's 1,000 questions you could ask. But the crematory board, the funeral home and crematory board, they should have been questioning why this man never renewed his registration. That's first and foremost. They should have sent a state worker inspector over to see what was going on. This story would have been null and void a long time ago. Because now you got to ask, how long has he had the bodies in there? How many people have sent bodies there and the bodies went somewhere else? I don't know. Because right now we're only talking about 115. Now imagine going in there counting all the bodies. And that's not including how the bodies were stored and how they looked when the person went in to count them this week. This is bad. This is man. This is a horrible story. Return to nature. We're going to read what's on the site. It's probably been taken down because it is a funeral home. That's the name of it. Return to Nature Funeral Home. So that's the point. What does the funeral home specialize in? And I don't know. 1 second, everybody. Now, they have one that says Return to Nature Funeral Home in Colorado Springs, but this isn't Colorado, where this allegedly took place. I'm on the website, but I don't know if this is the same city. This is for Colorado Springs. I'm trying to get Penrose. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Here we go. Temporarily closed. 1.5 star rating. Thank you all for joining me. 31 Werner Road, Penrose, Colorado, 81240. Let's see what they have to say on the website. It goes back to the one I just was looking at. So this makes me believe they own services in other places, because it goes back to the website I was just looking at. Return to Nature Funeral Home, Green Burial, Colorado, the Pine Box Company. Available 24 hours a day. Then it gives you the telephone number. It says, asterisk, as of July 2023, Return to Nature no longer offers cremation services. We will honor existing pre-arrangements for direct cremation only. What does that mean? Our mission has always been green burial. And on the website, you will see men holding a pine box with flowers on top. I'm utterly confused. Oh, it's the same people, because here are some people's testimonials. Let's read some of them. John's role in my dad's funeral service was everything. Wow. Let's see. They won't even let me open it up. This is weird. I want a green burial. I'm so happy that there is someone locally specializing in it. This is crazy. He's one of the most compassionate and caring person I've ever met. Everything was handled quickly and smoothly. Can't imagine going through this without him. Yeah, well, somebody's talking about the Hoffords. Hold on. The Hoffords are some of the best people on earth, passionate and caring. So ladies saying they don't want chemicals in their life and avoiding chemicals in life just to be dumped full of chemicals and death. Well, what difference does it make? Let me say this to this person who said this on this website. Embalming was designed for a reason. That's to preserve the body, because it has been recommended that you bury the dead within 3 days. Jewish customs, I think, is about 2 days or less. So it's common sense. The body is going to deteriorate because that's its job, is to break down. The body is filled with toxins. It's the flesh and bone and organs that will naturally deteriorate. So that's where the embalming process comes in, to preserve the body, to have open casket. Okay? Common sense. You want to look at the dead, close the casket, then put them down into the ground. So that's where the embalming comes in. So it doesn't really matter saying, well, a body full of chemicals to be only dumped in the ground. Well, we live in a world filled with chemicals. That's nothing new. Everything known to man has chemicals in it. Deodorant, food, emissions from plants, driving your car, emissions from your car. The world is filled with chemicals. It's just the way it is. But there's no excuse for this funeral home to have this building that's supposed to be a funeral home having 115 decaying bodies in it, and we don't even know how they were looking in there. It had to be bad for there to be a smell. And then we find out you have a real funeral home in this place called Colorado Springs. Because I'm on the website for Penrose. But when I initially went in, Colorado Springs came up. So this is what it says it offers: burial services, cremation arrangements, cremation services, funeral arrangements, memorial services. Reviews, 1.5. So the few people who were on there crying and moaning about how great the Hofferts are, why does it have a 1.5 rating? Why did they stop with the cremations in July? Because of what was going over in Penrose, I bet. There was something going on, and there's a reason why 115 bodies are just sitting in a room, sitting in a building, unattended, and decaying and stinking up a town of 3,000 people. Because the 115 didn't walk in there. They were put in there. So somebody just commented 15 hours ago. Joshua says, 115 bodies rotting in this place. Doughboy just commented 10 hours ago. Might as well been called Return to Sender Funeral Home. The families are getting the bodies back. The building looks like a former Pizza Hut. I'm dead. This has Netflix documentary written all over it. Tiffany Eakin says. This has at Netflix. Yeah, it sure is. 12 hours ago, Gary responds. This place is owned and run by pure evil criminals. 115 loved ones' bodies just rotting away in a rundown building. All involved in this criminal enterprise need to go to prison. How can things like this happen in Colorado and the USA? Very sick and demented. Somebody else, 115 bodies in an unrefrigerated storage building. Isaac Crosby says, this place was super busy. They told me I had to make a reservation. There were 115 people ahead of me. Now that's probably a very sour joke. Stephen says 15 minutes ago, it's so green that they don't even disturb the earth by burying the bodies. They're supposed to. Instead, bodies rot in the basement and neighboring properties have to call the police. Absolutely disgusting. Wow. Return to Nature Funeral Home in Penrose, Colorado is temporarily closed. I think you might want to change that. Once again, the services they offer: burial, cremation arrangements, cremation services, funeral arrangements, and memorial services. Well, you won't be doing any of those things. The Gazette says they are facing financial legal issues. Taxidermy claim made. Let's see what the Gazette has to say about what was really going on in this place. I pray that they can give us some information. Thank you all so much for joining me. This is a two-part live. Right now we're in Colorado talking about a very nasty debacle of dead bodies found in a Penrose, Colorado building. Allegedly supposed to be a funeral home. Their website has Colorado Springs, a funeral home. I don't know, but let's see what it says. Return to Nature Funeral Home under investigation after more than 115 improperly stored bodies were found this week by authorities was established 6 years ago in Colorado Springs, according to public records and past Gazette reporting. Fremont County Sheriff Alan Cooper confirmed the grisly discovery during a news conference Friday morning in Return to Nature Funeral Home location in Penrose. Investigators began searching the property located off of Warner Road in Penrose, south of Colorado Springs on Wednesday. Fremont County property records show that the funeral home building and lot are owned by Halford Homes, LLC, a business with a Colorado Springs address, and the Colorado Secretary of State's office declared delinquent on October 1st for failing to file a routine reporting form that was due at the end of July. So this story goes on and on and on. This is why I said, why did the site say July, no more cremations? Well, here we have it saying the Colorado Secretary of State's office said it was delinquent on October 1st for failing to file a routine reporting form that was due at the end of July. Now, mind you, they haven't had registration for the Penrose location since last November of 22, because we're at October. And the article I read before says November. So that means that was last year. You never registered the Penrose location, Penrose, Colorado location. Why not? Where the 115 bodies were found. Return to Nature has operated at several different addresses since John Halford Wright was featured in the 2017 Gazette. And I'm assuming, is it the older guy? Because there's two guys in the photograph, an older guy and a guy that's much younger. Return to Nature Funeral Home performs green burials without embalming chemicals or metal caskets, and was touted as Colorado Springs' first green funeral home in a 2017 Gazette story. John Halford, wife Carrie Halford, and Jack Doty opened Return to Nature Funeral Home, where customers can receive all the services of a traditional funeral home except embalming. It's different from human composting, where the body is transformed into soil. I knew through mortuary school about the cancer-causing chemicals, but never really thought about it, Halford said in a previous Gazette reporting. My mind started shifting from, I'd hope I haven't given such an unpleasant experience to families, to I have really been ingesting this stuff for so many years. The Return to Nature Funeral Home was licensed in Colorado Springs in 2017. According to documentation released by Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies, DORA, an investigator ruled that the Return to Nature Funeral Home has been operating as an unregistered funeral home since its license expired nearly a year ago. Associated Press contributed to this report. So they've been in business since 2017. License expired 1 year ago. So is this the license for Colorado Springs location or the Penrose? Or is it just one license altogether for the business itself? The Gazette is the source of this information. And as someone has said, where in God's name did you think the bodies were going? Because they offer funeral services, but without the embalming. So good question. That's the main question. They're not embalming the bodies. So where the bodies are supposed to go be buried? Where is the burial site? So let's ask that question. In Penrose, Colorado, do you all have a burial garden? Number one. Because why are 115 bodies stored in this place? Is this 115 that was supposed to be cremated only? As someone says, a machine broke down, they didn't have help. You have a license that's expired a year ago almost. You stopped cremations in July. Why? Because you've already been operating anyway without a license for a year. So ask yourself this question. You were supposed to renew this last November and did not. Why not? Number one. Number two, what happened in July to stop the cremation services? Were the 115 bodies found this week only to be cremated only? Or a combination of cremation and natural burial? Number three, where is the burial site? Where is the burial garden? I heard no mention of a burial garden because why are these bodies in this building? How many branches do they own? And you also hear they've had at least 6 different locations of funeral service buildings. Why? So ask that question. How many funeral buildings do you own where you actually do a funeral and a cremation? Number one. Why are you moving around a lot? Is it because of the licensing situation? Then you got to ask that question. Why would you not renew the license if this is your business? The state of Colorado says you can have this type of service, but you have to put the dead down within 24 hours. So what is the problem? How many people work for the Penrose location? Is this a matter of taking bodies from another location and dumping them there because something jumped off at another location? You hear they've moved around 6 times. Why? This is why I said, did they own funeral buildings in different parts of Colorado? Because there are people who are in the mortuary business, but they have different funeral homes. They may have a funeral home on the west side, a funeral home on the east side, a funeral home on the south side, a funeral home in the suburbs. See where I'm going? So this is what I'm asking. The 115 bodies found this week, were those bodies transferred there from other locales because something jumped off at another funeral home that they owned? That's the question. Let's hear about different types of burial services in Colorado. Get to the gist of this nonsense because this is just, let me see what the AP has to say about this as well. Oh, Lordy. This is bad, man. This is, and what my fear is, there won't be any justice. They'll just have fines. They'll claim bankruptcy. And they'll go live wherever. This is an old man, a pop and son business. I don't know. I believe it's a man and a woman owned it. It's I don't have no words for this. Just when you think you can just trust people to do right, you can't. See, Return to Nature is operated at several different addresses. Let me repeat that. Return to Nature has operated at several different addresses since its establishment in 2016. Why? I think that's what is going on here. They didn't keep up registration for a year. They keep moving around for some unknown reason. So this goes back to the city and the state. It is your job to keep regulations up to par on any business. It doesn't matter what it is. Ice cream shop, Pizza Hut, funeral homes, all the same. I think they've had problems at other places. And I think some of these bodies were transported there to Penrose from Colorado Springs or wherever the hell they last operated. Because the fact that they moved around 6 times, it didn't say they own 6 funeral homes. It says they've had 6 different addresses. That's different. That's like squatting or whatever. Or we just pack up, don't pay the rent here, then we go move over here. We stay here for 3 months, don't work out, we pack up, we go move over here. That's what it sounds like. This ain't no great business. So whoever's been commenting on that damn website, maybe you got good services from the Halfords, but 115 other people are going to beg to differ. I'm just saying. Lord have mercy. How old is Mr. Halford? That's what I'd like to know. Because I see a picture of 2 men in the picture, an older guy and a younger guy. And I'm trying to figure out which one owns the funeral home. There was a YouTube video in here and I don't see it popping up. Oh, Lord have mercy. The Pacific Northwest stays in drama too. I don't know. It's something about Utah, Colorado. What is it? The Daybells, the Frankies, dead bodies in funeral homes. You people just, you're living off the grid. That's one of the problems. The different mindsets of these people in the Pacific Northwest. Just like you're trying to tell people, everybody navigates differently. They're on a different mindset out there in the Pacific Northwest and how we live and navigate here in the South. We're very funny about burying the dead here in the South. We want to get the dead in the ground. But as I said, a lot of people don't have the money, so they got to come up with the money to get the ball rolling, to get the dead buried. That's why they embalm the bodies, for that reason. You may not bury the dead in 3 days. There's been times when bodies have been held out 3 weeks because the family didn't have the money. A person didn't have the money. So the body's just sitting back there, either naked or dressed in a funeral home, waiting for the services to commence. Okay. Let me go to my community page and I'm going to play you some other content coming out of Colorado pertaining to alternative burials that take place. And you can tell me what you think of these alternative ways. You're entitled to bury your loved one how you see fit. I posted an hour ago. Should Colorado Crematorium owner and others who disrespect deceased get jail time? 94% of you said yes. 6% of you said no. I'd like to know where these 6%ers are. See, this is what I keep talking about. I keep telling you all, these people who comment on these videos, community pages, articles, they're just like the people we're talking about in the story. What 6% of you think it's okay for these people to walk around after leaving 115 dead bodies in a damn building? Okay. Wow. Colorado business offers water cremation, a greener alternative to the end-of-life process. 4 years ago, this is by Rocky Mountain PBS.
A new chapter, even though this is a really technology-driven process, it's still a person and it's still someone's loved one. There is no life without death. It's really a Western culture thing, this death denial, where we just don't really think about it or talk about it, and it's become rather taboo.
We all will die. And when we can face that, I think we can also make dignified decisions about what that looks like.
Our current conventional methods of burial and cremation really perpetuate that idea that somehow we're separate from nature as humans. And really we're not. We do belong to the earth once we're gone. We're not special. We don't need to be preserved in any way. What you're looking at behind me is our water cremation system. At Beatrix Cremation, we really have 2 goals, and that's to, number 1, help people live on through nature, and number 2, to reduce the carbon footprint of the funeral industry.
This company is called Beatrix Cremation. Ooh, Lord have mercy. Let me say this before I finish this video. The fact that this Mr. Halford says in this article, or the one I read to you earlier, that he realized he didn't want to be, which makes no sense, putting out chemical elements into the universe by burying the dead, well, they're in the ground, number one. Number two, you're basically speaking for yourself. You didn't want to be coming in contact with the bodies while prepping them, so on and so forth. So really, you were at risk, Mr. Halford. So this is when you come up with this idea, let's find a better way to bury the dead, cremate them, blah, blah, blah. Because in the end, the family is not going to be dealing with the dead. Once the body leaves the hospital, it goes to the morgue. That's on the people that work at the morgue. The family only comes in if they want to do the hair, the makeup, bring the clothes. They're not going to be staying with the dead person windedly. Only time a personal person is going to be dealing with the dead outside of the people that work for the funeral home is if somebody's coming to do the hair, nails, and bring clothes for the dead. You know, maybe look at the dead person for a little while, talk to them, and then leave. You're the one that's going to be dealing with them. So really, it was beneficial for you not to be using the embalming chemicals. Let me make that clear before I finish this commentary here. You're listening to a lady that works at Be a Tree Cremation in Colorado. She is the CEO, Emily Nelson, in Denver, Colorado. This is an alternative to traditional burials. Specializing in the process of water cremation, technically known as alkaline hydrolysis. The process, which was legalized in Colorado in 2011, is surprisingly simple. The decedent gets loaded directly into this vessel, motion to a large cylindrical metal tube, sorry about today, behind her. Water is pumped into the vessel along with a small amount of potassium hydroxide. The mixture mimics the natural decomposition process and gently dissolves the body. When the process is finished, all that remains in the vessel are skeletal remains and things like gold teeth, artificial joints, surgeries such as knee replacements. The skeletal remains are ground into ashes for the family. Other items are safely recycled. The process also creates a nutrient-dense liquid branded as tree tea. Family members have the option to purchase small bottles of the liquid to use as nourishment for their plants at home. Are you hearing that? Okay. Nelson says water cremation is one of the most natural and environmentally friendly ways to return to the earth, which is what originally inspired her to research the process. Rocky Mountain PBS is the source of the audio you're listening to. This video is posted to my community board. If you need more information, let's finish hearing about this alternative process to cremation. It's called water cremation.
To reduce the carbon footprint of the funeral industry, which is not insignificant. We do a process called water cremation. Alkaline hydrolysis is the formal name, and we'll use water instead of fire to gently break down the body and still have ashes for the family at the end. We have no emissions or smoke coming from our building, and it's about 90% less energy than a flame cremation would be. One flame cremation is going to emit about as much CO2 as a 600-mile car trip does. So the decedent gets loaded directly into this vessel, and then we measure out a dry alkali flake, so it's called potassium hydroxide, and that actually activates the water molecule to mimic the natural decomposition process over the course of several hours. And by the end of the process, skeletal remains are still over here in this system. And then the liquid results from the process is drained over here. And it's a very nutrient-rich liquid that then will be transported over to Half Moon Farm, where it nourishes the soil there. So you're really returning back to the earth.
Oh yeah, these were all the most beautiful blooms. Yeah, it's still beautiful, but it's just a little bit more sleepy because it's the end of the season. Half Half Moon Farm is a vegetable and fresh cut floral farm. The partnership between Via Tree Cremation and Half Moon Farm is one of the healthiest ways in returning us back to the earth and for all of the scientific purposes where we came from and what our bodies are composed of. Where Half Moon Farm steps in is being able to provide a space where the nourishment, which is the liquid that is left over from the process, can be returned to the earth in a dignified and integrative space. This is not used on any edibles. We only are using on fresh cut flowers at this time. So everything that's in our fertilizers is what's in this liquid. Everything from nitrogen, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus.
There's actually no human DNA left in it after the process is done. It's a sterile mixture of amino acids and peptides and sugars. And then there's a bunch of little micronutrients that are in there as well that will vary from person to person.
We dilute it when we apply it because it allows the plant to digest them in the most, the healthiest manner.
So realistically, we can really only work with one person a day. Our process start to finish is about 18 hours long. Once we hit one a day in the month, then we'll really be at capacity here. And
so they're doing a body a day. This is an 18-hour process. Via Tree Cremation. You also hearing from a gentleman that owns this Half Moon Farm or works at this Half Moon Farm that takes the liquid part from this cremation, water cremation, and they use it to, I guess, use it as fertilizer at this Half Moon Farm. So are they selling flowers at this farm or what? I don't know. Just bringing you the content.
Start looking into other ways that we can serve more people. I think for me, upon thinking of my own death, I really knew that I wanted to find a way to live on through nature and really give my body a second chance to nourish something else and give life to something else.
When the plants are grown here, they leave to go to all sorts of celebrations along the Front Range, up in the mountains. And it's an opportunity for people to stop and look at first the literal beauty of them, but also the story of life and this regenerative idea behind us going back to our most physical sense is the earth.
So he says the flowers are taken for celebration purposes, meaning what exactly? Funerals, weddings, bar mitzvahs. Oh, Lordy. Just bringing you the information. You're entitled to your opinion. That was water cremation. This is a Colorado business. 18-hour process. The body is broken down, and whatever's left, which are bones, that's grounded down, and that's what the family will get. And then the liquefied portion of the process is given to this farm or whomever to nurture the earth with plants, flowers, so on and so forth. Less than a year after lawmakers in Colorado legalized the process, a new green alternative to traditional cremations as burials has begun. 11 Alive is the source. This is another content.
A new green alternative to traditional cremations or burials has begun.
It'll be the foundation of life here forever.
According to Seth Vidal with the Natural Funeral, in a process called natural reduction, after death, a body is placed in an air-filtered chamber with wood chips, alfalfa, straw, and microbial beings. The natural decomposition progression takes about 6 months. The business says there's no appreciable carbon emissions or release of toxic fumes. That's in contrast to flame cremation.
Now, this process takes 6 months, which that's too long to break down a body, especially if a person wants the remains, to put in an urn. I don't think nobody wants to wait 6 months to put their loved one in an urn or some type of box. But this is another alternative method to cremation. As I just brought you water cremations, now we have this natural reduction, the body put in this look kind of wooden to me, chamber. And this process is 6 months, which I think takes too long. But you're entitled to your opinion of this information.
And no real estate space is taken up as with conventional burials. One body generates about a pickup truck bed's worth of soil that families can either keep or donate to then be used to grow plants like trees and flowers. Colorado law prohibits the soil of multiple people being combined without permission and bars the soil from being used to grow food for human consumption or being sold. This type of natural burial through Vidal's service can cost $7,900, a more costly option compared to the nearly $7,000 average that families pay for service and cremation, but closer to the average cost.
So right now they're saying this natural reduction is $7,900. Why would I want to pay $7,900 to put my loved one in a wooden barrel to take 6 months to dissolve, to only give the remains back to the earth to plant flowers and plants? Cremation says $7,000. That's still expensive. $7,900 for this procedure, $7,000 for cremation, and what do they have up here for burial? Hold on one second. This is all BS. $7,800 for a burial. Let me think about that for a second. $7,800 for a burial, $7,000 for a cremation, or $7,900 for this alternative human in a wooden barrel, or whatever you call it. Somebody don't see this. Oh my goodness, I can't today. Happy Saturday, everybody. Lord have mercy. This is nonsense.
For funeral, viewing, and burial at $7,800, according to the National Funeral Directors Association.
As I said, obviously the people out west do things differently. Some may be in agreement to these alternative ways of cremating the body. I don't see the point in prolonging a cremation. That's the purpose of a cremation, is to get it over with. It's done and it's over. It's cheaper. It's faster. So you're entitled to your opinion on how you want to bury your loved one. In the end, this funeral business is expensive to bury a loved one. You spend all this money on services, flowers, depending on where you're having it, the funeral home itself, the casket. The casket is what costs the most. So we just got these pretty caskets sitting in the ground, but that's what we've been doing. But the old way was boxes before we had these fancy caskets built. As I said, you're entitled to your opinion, interpretation of the information. I jog my memory back to when my mother was having services at a funeral home in Chicago. And I remember walking by one of the rooms. It was the weirdest thing because I'd never been in a funeral home that had so much traffic flow. But naturally, this is a major city. The south side of Chicago has a high population, naturally, of residents. So this was a very well-known funeral home where she was buried. And, well-known funeral home where her services took place. And it just freaked me out because I kept looking at all these people coming and going. So I was walking by the little rooms where bodies were, sitting for people to come in to, to observe the bodies in the casket before their services began. And it was creepy to me because I was just like, I've never been in a funeral home that had this much going on. All these rooms with different bodies in the rooms. Naturally, they were in the caskets, of course, but it was just weird because I'd never seen anything like that before. And the one body that stuck out to me the most was, I went by one room. It was a small room, and there was an elderly black man in a casket, but it was a rayon box. Because I remember we went in the room where they had the caskets that you could pick out what type of casket you want to bury your loved one in. And I remember seeing that blue box in the selection room. So here I am on the day that we're having her, viewing. That's what you call the viewing. And I walk by this room And I just peep in, and I see this man in this rayon box. And I thought, oh my gosh, somebody purchased that box for their loved one. Hello, Stardust. And I couldn't take my eyes off the box. And the reason why I couldn't take my eyes off the box is because I remember looking at that box in the selection room, and I remember the box was only a couple of $100. Because naturally, the person who was showing us the caskets was telling us, pointing at each casket and giving us the rundown of the prices. And in my mind at the time, I didn't think much about that box, but that was the cheapest box you could buy to put a loved one in. And here sits this elderly Black man in one of those rayon boxes. I don't know, that just creeped me out. But I know that obviously that's all the family could afford. And this is why I'm saying this is an expensive business, the funeral home business, because this funeral home, the owners, they own several funeral homes. I think maybe 3 or so in the city and out in the suburbs of Chicago. So they were making big money. And like I said, there were several viewings and funeral services going on simultaneously in the building. And I had never experienced that before. When I have gone to funerals here in the South, it was only one funeral at a time out of the funeral home or the church. So that's what I'm accustomed to. I had never been in a place where there were several different families walking amongst each other, viewing bodies in caskets. I had never experienced that. So that's just a short story for you all. Kevin Frankie, crybaby, going to press charges against his eldest daughter, Sherry. Dirty Ruby left her children alone for how long? Their allegation she put Kevin Frankie out of the house. I also saw a picture of Ruby Frankie and Miss Hildebrandt, Miss Jody, where they look awfully close on a boat. Was this the time when she came from that certain trip and decided to put Mr. Kevin Frankie out of the house? We learn now that law enforcement were the ones that broke down the Ruby Frankie door to the Springville house. So nobody broke into the house. And this is what I put on my community board weeks ago. Please take the post. I said, do you believe this was a setup to get empathy from the public? Somebody breaking the door down on purpose or jimmying the door? We now find out that the police broke the door down because they went there looking for the children. Part 2 of this live stream. Kevin Frankie, Ruby Frankie, Jody Hildebrandt, now a third party introduced into this debacle, a Pam Botcher. She is the person that Ruby Frankie called to get the other 2 teenagers from the Springville home, but they later ended up going with Sherry and the intermingling of the Department of Human Services. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $BigAngie, 129 Cash App. Stickers and chats are welcome during the live stream, part 2. Here we go, everybody. What in the world? KUTV2 Salt Lake City News is the source. Who was this Pam Botcher? What was her role in dealing with Jody Hildebrandt and Ruby Frankie? Did she ever witness abuse of the children? And why did Ruby Frankie call her to get the remaining 2 children after she realized the boy child had escaped? Why did she call this lady?
Enforcement and DCFS responded to Ruby Frankie's Springville home the day of her arrest. It is our top story tonight. I'm Mark Cavell.
I'm Heidi Hatch. Brian Schnee's been covering this case extensively for us and also obtained these new documents. So, Brian, what did you uncover today?
Two new pieces of information tonight. Police reports showing how law enforcement and DCFS responded to Ruby Franke's home in Springville on the day of her arrest. Now, Ruby and Jody-Hildebrandt have been in the Washington County Jail since their arrests on child abuse allegations. A few weeks ago, we told you about a third member of Connections Classroom, which is Jody-Hildebrandt's business. A woman named Pam Botcher was named along with Ruby Franke as Connections team members. On the day of Jody and Ruby's arrests, the two outstanding Frankie children were found in Pam Botcher's care in American Fork. This was after police served a search warrant at Frankie's home in Springville. They broke down the front door of the home after not getting an answer at the door. According to the police reports, Botcher told police that Ruby called her around noon citing a family emergency, and she asked if her two children could stay with her for a while. The two children wanted to stay with Botcher, but were ultimately placed in the care of Ruby's oldest daughter. Coming full circle here, Ruby's niece, Jessie Hildebrandt, told me in an interview almost a month ago that Pam was one of Jody's friends and was always around the house when Jody lived in Utah County.
Pam Botcher, when I was living with Jody, Pam Botcher was around. She was Jody's best friend. And I didn't realize that she was connected in this. I mean, I have very strong feelings towards Pam because of not that she was directly applying abuse, she wasn't actually involved, but she was one of the people that was constantly surveilling, the surveillance of reporting back to Jody. She was always at the house just because she was friends with Jody, so it's sometimes a little murky. But wow, that's very disappointing, and I'm wondering why she's not being, why they're not talking about her.
Well, the second piece of new information, according to these police reports, Ruby's husband, Kevin Franke, wanted to file charges against his own daughter just days after the arrest. The day after Ruby's arrest, her oldest daughter was granted custody of two of her children. That daughter, a DCF caseworker, and other family members went into Franke's home to take personal items to four total children, two in her care and two in state custody in southern Utah. Ruby's husband, Kevin, called police the following day to report a burglary and theft of electronic devices at that Springville home. Police told Kevin there was no burglary, and they served a search warrant 2 days prior and knocked down the front door. As for the items, Ruby's oldest daughter had them and brought them to the police department to return to Kevin. Nonetheless, Kevin still wanted his daughter charged with theft. Police told him they wouldn't be doing that because it wasn't her intent to deprive him of the items. Now, according to police, Kevin also threatened to sue the department because he wasn't satisfied with the answer. So I reached out to his attorney today regarding a previously scheduled interview that was canceled as of this morning. He told me in a statement, quote, Kevin didn't do either. He and Sherry are working together on bygones and resuming a loving and healthy father-daughter relationship. The statement continued to say Kevin is still trying to understand and correct the upside-down world that was dealt to him. It's a lot to deal with all at once.
The upside-down world he's been dealt. Are you all hearing this? Kevin Franke, you need to grow up. You're despicable. You're no different than Ruby or Jody. You're sitting here trying to blame your eldest child for taking something out of the house. The law enforcement and state allowed her to go in there to get things for the children. Same reason why the state went in there to get belongings for the children, because the children needed things. Duh. What do you care about what she took out of the house? You've been gone a whole year. The house could have been burned to the ground. You would have never known. Sandblasted. You would have never known. You've only talked to your wife 4 times allegedly since you have been gone from that location before the arrest of your wife. And you're sitting here wanting to have charges filed against your own child. But now you're trying to work on your differences. You're trying to work on your differences with Ruby's relatives. How convenient after the fact of children being abused. It didn't dawn on you why 2 of your children were separated. 2 children over here in southern Utah, 2 other children in northern Utah. You don't find that strange. But the only thing you can think to do is make up stories that somebody broke in the house and tore up stuff and stole stuff. And, oh, I really don't know what's missing. You don't know what's missing, but you don't mind saying, oh, I want to file charges against my daughter. Now you got the lawyer trying to take it back and say, oh, no, they're working on everything. He didn't do either. Well, then why are we hearing about it? I can go through Google right now and 3 or 4 articles in a row says he was trying to file charges against his child. So where would they get that from? So now you want to say the media made that up? Really? The hand you've been dealt. Well, my understanding, you're the children's biological father, so you left on your own. Doesn't matter if Ruby, Jody suggested you leave. You're a grown man with 2 feet, 2 hands, and a brain, allegedly. So your choice to leave the house was on you. The fact you had no contact with these people, that was on you. You don't deserve to have the children. If a judge gave you those kids, the judge needs his ass whipped as well, or she. Because I wouldn't give you any children. Anybody that can stay gone from their children a year, they're null and void in my book. Because there's nothing wrong with you. You weren't sick. You weren't disabled. You didn't have amnesia. You got hit by a car, was wandering the wilderness for a year. It's bullshit. Now we have this Pam Botcher being brought into the story. You hear commentary from Jody's niece that the woman was around surveying her and reporting back what they were doing in the house. Why are you people getting involved with this Jody Hildebrandt? What is this? The new version of Jim Jones? We got now a woman, Jane Jones. The occult is real. But are we shocked? Because you have people who eagerly follow in behind people, listening to them, acting like fucking zombies. You had a president that did it. Give you subtle hints to go storm the gate at the Capitol. Yeah, I'm going to say that because you people out here are sick, that you can be easily manipulated into doing things. You don't have a free mind. And there comes a point when you get to a certain age, you should not be easily coerced to do wrong. Makes no sense. What are you gaining? What were you people gaining by slumbering around with Hildebrandt? Oh, leave your husband. Don't talk to him. I also got information that when he first left the Springville home, Chad went with him. But no, Jody says he needs to go back home. Who is this Jody Hildebrandt? We also find out she has children and was married. What happened in her marriage? Why don't she have her children? Pay attention. This is retribution. I always tell you there's more to the story. All you have to do is listen. This is retribution. Jody's angry at the world for whatever happened in her life and marriage with her husband and her not having access to her children or custody of her children. So she's mad at the world. She's angry. She's venting out. So now she's trying to take down anybody with a relationship that she can sabotage. This is why she was cited by the board, psychiatry board or whatever, about her improprieties with clients, bad-mouthing clients to the Mormon elders, jumping in this Ruby Frankie, Kevin Frankie relationship, disrespecting her own nieces, nephews, or whomever. She's a tyrant. And she obviously has game because she's taking all these people under her who follow her around like little sick puppies. So what is it about Jody Hildebrandt that everybody's so consumed with taking her advice and listening to her? And the fact that she had access to children in her house and were abusing them and they were malnourished, that shows you this woman is ill. And Ruby Frankie, you are ill. And Kevin, you are just as ill. And you're showing us that you rode this ride with Ruby and Jody all alone because you stayed gone from the family. Then you pop back up making up stuff like somebody stole stuff out of the house. Then you're talking about suing the damn police department. For what? You left. Doesn't matter what your wife said or what Jody said. You still left the house. That was a grown man's decision. Nobody told you to leave. Let's get more information pertaining to this Pacific Northwest debacle of fools. Inside Ruby Frankie's alleged double life nightline is the source. One moment, please.
On the address of your emergency.
I just had a 12-year-old boy show up here at my front door asking for help.
It was August 30th. A 12-year-old boy shows up at a stranger's house.
He's emaciated. He's got tape around his leg. He's hungry and he's thirsty. What's your mom's name? Ruby Frankie? Ruby Frankie is his mom's name.
Ruby Frankie. Ironically, she'd been a high-flying Mormon momfluencer, attracting 2.5 million followers on her YouTube channel, 8 passengers. Ruby's personal brand built around tough love.
I was really hoping that keeping them home from school and wiping the floorboards would really bring pain.
But now Ruby's 12-year-old son's pain brings this neighbor to tears.
This boy has been... This kid is obviously he's obviously covered in wounds.
The house the boy says he escaped from, Jody Hildebrandt's. Hours south of Ruby's house.
I'm Jody Hildebrandt, and I'm Ruby Frankie.
Jody is a marriage counselor who also treated sex addiction through her work with the counseling network, LifeStar. She joined forces with Ruby Frankie on a life coaching business called Connections.
All of us want connection. We want to have relationships where we feel close and where there's love.
After that 911 call, Ruby's 12-year-old son and her 10-year-old daughter were taken to the hospital.
The police find laptops, tablets, cell phones. They find ropes. They find duct tape. They find handcuffs.
Jody and Ruby were arrested and charged with 6 counts of felony child abuse. While the arrest sent shockwaves, some who knew Jody Hildebrandt have been raising concerns for years.
We knew that Jody does this. We knew 14, almost 15 years ago that she's already done this to me.
Jesse Hildebrandt, who uses they/them pronouns, has spent years finding a voice after suffering what they call brutal abuse at the hands of their Aunt Jody.
She would lock me in this room and write out these sins on a paper. She would come back in and read these sins back to me and have me kneel on the floor on my hands and knees and beg for forgiveness.
The 30-year-old has built a life far away from a strict Mormon upbringing.
I grew up in a very traditional Mormon household. Dad is the provider and my mom is a stay-at-home mom. My younger childhood was very happy.
But during adolescence, Jesse started to rebel. The conflicts came to a head. Jesse's parents decided it was best for Jesse to go live with Aunt Jody, and without warning, they left their teenager at a family gathering.
Woke up to a knock on the door. It was Jody and my grandma and grandpa, and to tell me that my life, as I knew it, was about to change.
At first, Jesse says they decided to give the new arrangement a chance. After all, Jesse's aunt was a licensed counselor.
Jody Hildebrandt has been one of the top recommended therapists by the Mormon Church in Utah for at least 15 to 20 years.
But at home, Jesse says their aunt was an altogether different person.
She made me sleep outside in the snow. She duct taped me. I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone.
What, in theory, was the justification for the duct tape?
The duct tape was, in her words, an external reminder to me that I'm a liar and that every word that comes out of my mouth is a lie.
In March of 2010, Jesse made it to the police station in American Fork and filed a report against Aunt Jody. Jesse's statements in that report echoing the story they told us: duct tape over her mouth, sleeping outside, not allowing her to talk. Police sent Jesse to a teen safe home, but after one day, Jesse ended up back with Aunt Jody.
So after I went to the police, the punishments got more and more severe.
After nearly a year of living with Aunt Jody, their aunt brought Jesse to work.
And I have to, it is now or it is never. And I grabbed that jacket and I literally just started running.
Jesse never went back. With dark accusations against Jody coming to light, scrutiny is also falling on her partner on Connections, Ruby Frankie.
They are destroying
People who watched 8 Passengers were the ones who first kind of ring the alarm as to this alleged abuse that we're seeing now.
People have been pointing out how problematic this family is for a while.
When does the way a parent parents go from cringeworthy to child abuse?
My bedroom was taken away for 7 months and you give it back like a couple weeks ago.
I don't think our viewers know that.
Sleeping on a beanbag.
I'm sleeping on a beanbag since October.
After the controversy, viewers were questioning Ruby's parenting style and her husband Kevin's, who often joined her on the 8 Passenger channel. The two have now been separated for more than a year.
Many of the viewers of 8 Passengers over the past 2 or 3 years became more and more disturbed and started turning Ruby and Kevin into Child Protective Services in Utah.
In 2020, a Change.org petition requesting that CPS check on the children received hundreds of signatures. Impact has obtained records showing police responded to the Frankie home more than a dozen times over the past few years, including several reports of juvenile problems in 2018 and 2019, and multiple welfare checks in 2022.
And to the point where they felt like it was a necessity to go talk to the family, at least to the children, to find out if there was any merit to any of the allegations.
But police who investigated the case were unable to speak to the children and filed a request for a warrant to enter the home.
Even though it was submitted to the judge, the warrant was not signed and it wasn't granted. And so there wasn't much they could do at that point.
CPS is now being investigated for their handling of the case by Utah's Child Welfare Legislative Oversight Panel. Through his attorney, Ruby's husband, Kevin, says those early complaints were nothing serious.
Kevin felt like that they were just being harassed by people online, calling the authorities and having to come to their home. It was just a difference in parenting style, but nothing abusive up to that point.
After the shocking arrest, there's a growing chorus of people laying the blame squarely on Jody Hildebrandt.
It's 100% Jody. And I understand why the public is focusing on Ruby. It's Ruby's children. But all of these theories and these modalities and these parenting ideas, that all comes from Jody.
Kevin feels like Jody manipulated the entire family, children included.
Since her arrest, Jody Hildebrandt has given up her counseling license. Sitting in a striped prison jumpsuit, Jody answered to a higher authority, a judge.
Jody Nan Hildebrandt?
Yes.
Okay.
Ruby Frankie sat expressionless, a far cry from the bubbly momfluencer of 8 Passengers fame.
Miss Frankie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Both ordered held without bail, and neither have entered a plea. Impact reached out to both Ruby and Jody's attorneys. Ruby's declined to comment. We have yet to hear back from Jody's.
Just one count of aggravated child abuse is up to 15 years in jail. At the same time, they can say, you know what, we found out you abused them 6 different times. You could really get to a high number here.
Ruby's 4 minor kids are in the state's custody, but their father, Kevin, seen here in these DailyMail.com photos, is trying to win them back.
His hopes and his objective is to convince the state that he's a good dad and that those children would be much better off with him than in state's custody.
For Jesse, healing and moving on has been a long and winding journey.
I was incredibly unstable in my early 20s. I thought that I was evil. I thought that I was this unlovable creature from hell.
Jesse is not currently speaking with their parents. Jesse says the wounds from the alleged abuse at the hands of Aunt Jody still too raw. Impact reached out to Jesse's father for comment and did not receive a response. Jesse is now living life on their own terms and recently moved to Seattle to be a tattoo artist.
I've been a musician pretty much my whole life. This is just a song about just relationships, like all good songs.
At the last scheduled train to the city, watch the glow from the street lights go by.
What would you say to Jody if she were sitting across from you right now? You did not win.
Amen.
You do not own my life.
Just stay.
You have no power.
Our thanks to Juju.
ABC News is the source. That was a wonderful commentary. Insightful commentary. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Let's chop up what was said briefly. Wiping the floor and staying home, Miss Ruby thought would bring her children pain. Why would you want your children to be in pain, Miss Frankie? A 12 and a 10-year-old were at this Ivan's home, not at the Springfield home. Allegations of numerous complaints against Ivan's home, I guess, and Springfield as well, I guess. I don't understand really what's going on here. The separation of the 4 children in separate homes. Why were the children separated? Number one. I'm not going to ask why they were abused because there's a stupid question to even ask. Why were the children separated? Why were 2 over here and 2 over there? We have Jody's niece speaking, a 30-year-old who she had took in her house because she had became wayward, deemed by her parents. Things did not work out in that household where she was abused by her. This is where we hear this duct taping business. Obviously, this is why duct tape was used on the 2 of Ruby's children that were found in the Ivan's home that belonged to Miss Jody Hildebrandt. The duct tape was used because she was a liar. Show her she was a liar. Hildebrandt was a top therapist in the state of Utah in the Mormon community. I guess she came highly recommended. The fact that we have Ruby laughing at the beanbag comment from the Sun, filmed in one of those YouTube videos, 8 passengers, that shows you how demented her spirit is. She's tainted. She's evil. She wants her children to suffer. Scrub these floors. I want you to get painful scrubbing these floors, laughing about a beanbag, a child sleeping on a beanbag for 7 months. What's funny about that? You're sleeping in your bed, but your child is sleeping on the floor in an open room where everybody can see him coming and going. What about him dressing, putting his clothes on, taking his clothes off, putting on pajamas? You didn't care about that because you wanted your kids to suffer. And indeed, they did. An oversight panel is investigating CPS. What will happen? Who will be reprimanded? Because we see this every day with CPS when they keep continuously giving people passes. Their workers and supervisors not following through with cases where children are being abused and allegedly they don't have proof that they're doing this. The parents are doing this and that. And later we hear the children are missing and they're dead or severely abused, as you have in this case. Once again, the ball was dropped by CPS. The signs were there all along, but you didn't take heed. Numerous calls made from 18 to 22, yet nothing. They have not entered pleas, Jody and Ruby. Why not? Because you're probably been advised that there are going to be more counts. So you're just going to wait till what? All the counts come in? Or maybe you'll just go ahead and take a plea and say, yeah, I did this to these children. This niece is not speaking to her parents. She's moved on in life. She ran away from Jody's house that last time from coming from a alternative housing for wayward children. She only stayed there a day. And sadly, we hear this story a lot with certain lifestyles where children no longer speak to their parents. And that's a terrible thing. Now, some people have been able to amend their relationships with their parents who were strict and abused them or sent them to other places where they were abused. It takes a lot to look a person in the eye and continue a relationship with them knowing that they've mistreated you and or sent you somewhere where you were abused or that you had strict parents who just didn't know how to be a parent. And everybody is not the best at parenting because, like they said, everyone has their own style. But as this woman says in this commentary, when do you realize that you've gone too far in the parenting department? KUTV News, Salt Lake City is my next source. Former Jody Hildebrandt client has described her therapy with her as transactional. Yeah, it's a business. My way of getting back at the universe for how I have been portrayed and treated. I want revenge. That's who Jodi Hildebrandt is. And sadly, Rubi is just like her. That's why they were evenly meshed and yoked into this connections business. They were the same. They are the same. Thank you for joining me. Yeah. Don't have proof. That's why the kids go back.
With Jodi Hildebrandt.
So years ago, I was made aware of Jodi and her program and her therapy sessions, which I began in person here in St. George. I felt like her style was a little bit more maybe aggressive than what I had experienced in the past, which I thought was going to be a really good thing. I then joined her women's group, our weekly group sessions, and so I did that for nearly a year.
What were those sessions like, the group sessions?
Those group sessions were myself and however many other ladies, I would say 10 to 12 regularly, same women, and had a expectation of joining every week, not missing any weeks, 2-hour-long sessions, probably similar to other group therapies where you were, checking in, you were asking for time if you need time, with the group specifically, and within the group, other rules were that you had to make a minimum of 7 calls a week, and you had to be available for a minimum a week. So you were on the phone a lot with these other group members, not so much Jodi herself. If you wanted to speak to Jodi or get help from her, you had to do one-on-one private sessions and then pay additional for those.
Now, the initial reason you went and sought therapy, was this on your own? Was this couples? How would you describe what you were looking to do? Because the folks I've spoke to all have kind of a different experience of why they were going in the first place.
Absolutely. Mine was just myself, just looking to further improve, and you hear of somebody different or a different way. So it was just worth a shot of something new.
How did you find her? Do you remember?
It was a friend of a friend. I couldn't even remember the friend if I tried. Name came up, I looked up the website and booked an appointment that way.
How would you describe some of the conversations or tactics, without getting into the nitty-gritty details, of course, but you mentioned perhaps a little uniqueness in her style. How so?
Mm-hmm. I would say with traditional therapy or other therapists I've gone to, there's a little bit more of a feeling of understanding of maybe what a person's been through, whereas this was pretty strict on like no excuses, you're just going to make it happen and it's up to you 100%. I would call it more military style if I had to give it a name versus something else.
How long did you end up participating in either individual or group sessions as it pertains to Jodi Hildebrandt or her company?
Just over a year.
In your individual session, right, because I know you did the women's group, but in any of your individual sessions when you had more of that one-on-one interaction, did anything stand out from those experiences?
The one thing that I mentioned when I did speak to other friends about her and the program, she felt extremely uncaring. It felt like transactional. The group, I got a lot of validation or help within the group. I think it was having that level of support and accountability. If you're going to be talking on the phone and talking about things for, this many hours a week, it's kind of maybe a higher likeliness to work than a 1-hour session a week with someone else. But it just was like a general feeling of uncaring. I went there in a moment of like really deep despair, if you will. And it just kind of was like, well, either sign up and pay the money or see you later, And I took that again as like, well, maybe that's.
I'm going to interject here. This is the same commentary you hear from the man who brought allegations against her to where she ended up getting cited by the board, state board. You don't give her what she wants. She turns on you. This is when she started telling that man's business about him being addicted to porn and this and that to the elders of the church. She's vindictive. She knew what she was doing to all of these people that she has harmed. She has abused them. She's broken the oath she took to help and do no harm. She's evil. And Ruby rode the ride with her. And it's going to be very sickening to find out this other lady, Pam, is also just as crazy as her. The person that Ruby called to try to get those other two children over to her possession. But instead they end up being in the care of Miss Sherry, the older sister. This is who Jody is. She's vindictive. She's angry. She's mad at the world. Woe is me. I'm tarnished. I'm tainted. This is what's done to me. Now I'm going to give this back to the universe. This is usually what happens with people. Hurt people hurt people. Dr. Phil says it best. They've done this to me. I'm going to give it back. See, it's all unfolding. Jacked up life, jacked up marriage. Don't have her children. Don't know the ages of the children. Probably don't even have a relationship with the children or the husband. Don't have a good relationship with her other family members. Then here comes Ruby jumping on board. Same thing. Cut her family members off. Don't you see there's a pattern? Now, what are we going to find out about this Pam Botcher person? She don't speak to her parents either. She's not friends with her parents. She don't have support. She cut them off. It's a chain reaction. It is like the occult. Wind them up like dolls, and then bring them into the fold and slowly start manipulating them with, as this woman is saying, this harsh truth. They don't abide by it. Then I lash out, try to find a way to bring them down. Then I go on to the next victim. It's a pattern. And this comes from being traumatized, hurt, abused, anger, bitterness. That's what you're hearing here. Retribution.
Later, you know. And I took that again as like, well, maybe that's the difference between her and others. You know, she's not really sympathetic or soft. It was kind of like, felt like pay the money, join the group, buy the books, buy the program, and see you later.
Why did you decide to leave either both the group or individual sessions after about that year's time?
Individual, again, I didn't feel like I was getting a lot out of it. Not that I needed necessarily compassion. It just didn't feel really conducive. The group, I felt like I got a lot, again, of just maybe that one-on-one support, but it wasn't really the type of support that I thought that it was going to evolve to.
Exactly.
Well, obviously, Jody is still in the local jail in Washington County, as is Ruby Frankie, and we're waiting to hear if bail will be granted or anything like that. But what I haven't asked you yet is, what are your thoughts just on this whole situation after you heard that she was arrested and on these allegations of child abuse charges?
It's time to get happy.
Sorry about that, you guys. Intermission. How many more victims are going to come forward saying they felt abused or hoodwinked, bamboozled, coerced into doing things that they didn't want to do in their lives by instructions from this lady, Miss Botcher, and Miss Frankie?
You know, when I first saw her name in the news, I wasn't familiar with Ruby at the time, but her name is pretty specific, and I, you know, kind of went, that can't be. And, you know, of course, it was easily identifiable to be her. I'm really shocked on the level of egregiousness where, you know, her counseling was so much honest, humble, responsible, like almost like I said, military style of like feeding that into us as the participants as like, you're to be this way, just like really, really, aggressively. So to hear her main motto be like completely contradictory to her life and the things that she's doing was just really astonishing.
Was there any instances of she using a shaming tactic with anybody, whether it was group or individual?
I believe so. I believe so, in the sense that, again, maybe that uncaring coming across more like shaming. If you were going to allow it to affect you, like shame on you, like that's your own problem, as though we don't have human emotions and you should basically choose to just shut that off and deal with it. There was one more particular thing that stood out to me that she spoke about in the group. Felt a bit unprofessional at times, that I think at some point maybe her license was taken away. And she spoke about that kind of a lot. And I mentioned that because it was almost kind of weird that she mentioned that she was basically doing this higher duty to the world, this higher service, if you will, and that she was punished by society, in the light of like taking her licensing away. But it was interesting how many times it was mentioned.
Exactly.
So it sounds like she thought very highly of herself and her abilities.
That would be a very accurate statement.
But she was angry.
From my perspective.
She's angry.
The only other thing that comes to mind, many of the people in my group, and I would say probably almost 100%, they were married, and through the LDS church referrals. I think mainly for their husband, they're doing this kind of group duel with her, so she did the male group and the female group. I believe at one other point there was one or two other singles that didn't last very long, but it was primarily married people. And I did, toward the end, a lot of the reason for leaving is I felt like it was very targeted toward the church, and mentioned that the church was paying for these people's services, which, left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, knowing not that people aren't deserving of help or the church isn't supposed to help. It felt very targeted again from her.
So I was curious to how much she was charging for the services. As you hear, there were times when others in this company would be the one speaking to the clients. You'd have to, I guess, ask to speak to Miss Jody-Hildebrandt directly during a counseling session. So I wonder, what was the fee for the sessions? Were the fees different depending on who you spoke to versus a regular person in the company or Miss Hildebrandt? What were the fees? Now you hear that the church paid for these fees to Miss Hildebrandt. This is very orchestrated when you listen to this information, because I thought these people were just referred to her by whomever, just a random person. But now we hear that the church paid. So that's why I was curious when the one guy brought forward the claims that the elders knew of his personal dealings with her in the sessions. I thought, well, how would she know which church he went to? It's because now the church are the ones who recommended her services. Now, they may not have known the guy's vices or what he was going through or what he was suffering from allegedly, but they later find out because Jody couldn't wait to go tell it to the elders. He's doing this. He's a porn addict, blah, 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 whatever she was saying about him. Now his business is aired out. That's for him to tell, or any client that wants to tell anybody in the church their business. That's their prerogative, but it's not your job as the therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, whomever, to go tell their business to anyone. This woman is a violator in the highest regard. Telling clients' business, gossiping about them to the church, abusing children, duct taping children. I mean, what did I tell you? What's next? What would have been next? Murder. This is Daybell, Lori, Chad, all over again. That was the next ladder. Because when you're starving children, where can it go from there? It's the obvious. Homicide. This woman is, both of them, they're disgusting.
Deserving of hell for the church isn't supposed to help. It felt very targeted again from her, more in a way of like, I found a way to take advantage of a niche, and I found a loophole, but she was again thinking highly enough about herself that she was almost bragging about it.
Mm-hmm.
I can validate some of the male perspectives that I've been hearing. It was the narrative was very much like, if your husband is not perfect, it is your job to leave him, and he is undeserving. And if he was to be living honest, responsible, humble, these values, then he would be deserving. But it honestly, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because it reminds me, I remember telling a friend, it felt like if I had been married entering the group, I would be exiting the group as a divorced. It felt very...
This goes back to what I just said pertaining to Jodi. She is vengeful, bitter to whatever happened to her in her marriage, the losing of the license, all that's her doing. The violations from the board with that guy who brought forward charges against her. All this is still her doing. That's the gist of the story pertaining to all these people involved in the abuse of these children. Every move they made was articulated, orchestrated by themselves. It does not matter who was in. You hear the niece saying Jodi's the reason for the children being abused and her, Rubi leaving her husband, the duct tape of the children. It doesn't matter. You allowed it. Rubi allowed herself to get immersed in this connections group company, abusing her children, allowing this woman to abuse her children, listening to this woman tell her for her husband to leave. That's because her marriage was jacked up and broke up. As you hear this young woman here saying, everything was targeted from the church to her. It's a conspiracy. Sad to say, but it is. Everybody's running around in a circle like rats. No one's getting outside the circle. Don't you see? This is orchestrated. And this Mormon church, I have a problem with them. Not saying all Mormons are bad, but you keep hearing wild, whack-ass stories from people in this faith. What is it? You keep hearing whack stories, demented stories about children abuse, women rape. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. These people are being lured in by this faith. That's what's even more diabolical. Besides these two meshing with each other, Jodi and Rubi, we've got the Mormon faith sitting in the background with little strings onto the dolls, if you will. This is a diabolical pattern, diabolical circle. And all these people didn't even know each other. This is the most interesting thing about this type of story. All these people never knew each other. They never knew each other. And now they're all evenly woven together. This niece, Jodi, Rubi, the husband, Kevin, the children, this guy who's a client of Jodi's. Now this woman who's a client of Jodi's. Do you see the circle? Fortunately, these two people have gotten out. 2 are now locked up. 4 children in state's care. A husband separated from a wife. We will see what will happen between the children and Mr. Frankie. It's a diabolical tale. And that's what's scary. It's one thing to have one tainted person walking around on the earth, but when he or she decides to lash out those tentacles and something jumps in the fold, either willingly or unwillingly, now we've got a marching band. This is wicked. The fact that people can be easily coerced and adults is scary as hell. It's one thing to manipulate children, but when you are grown and you can get manipulated by somebody to go leave your husband, abandon your children, abuse your children, allow these people to abuse your children, you need help. And these two are eerily similar, Rubi and Jody. That's the reason why they got along.
Divorced. It felt very much like, not necessarily she hated Ben or marriage, but she definitely wasn't an advocate of for them.
Not anybody happy,
I don't
no.
know in what level of perfection one can establish, but we're all human, and it definitely felt like there was never going to be reaching her level of
exactly
her own
expectations,
perfection and the perfection she expected within her groups.
When we think of home,
thank you all so much. Expectations. She expected, I guess, a higher caliber from her clients. And as this young lady is saying, we're all human. And in the end, it's up to these people to decide how they want to navigate with their personal relationships, because they're coming to you for help. But in the end, they will be the ones to make the decision how they want to navigate. And, you know, a lot of us can be narcissistic to say we want people to do what we think they should do and act a certain way. But that is the whole point. People are human and they're going to fall short of the glory. That's just the way it is. And maybe this lady should not have been, I can say she should not have been a therapist in any form, counselor. She should not have been a mother to children. She should just be one of those women that sit at home and talk crazy to the television and flip the channels and bang her remote around on her recliner. That's Jody and Rubi. Not wives, not mothers, not counselors, not leaders, because they're not going to do anything but lead you into the abyss. And now they get to sit in a jail and think about all the nonsense that they've exacted out into the earth. And they're in the place where they should be. They have no right to walk out here with the rest of these people to exact more harm, especially dealing with children. Now, you're an adult and you want to follow in behind these goons, that's on you. That's on you. That's on you. I'm going to give you a brief update while I'm giving you this commentary. Just a day ago, Frank James, the man who opened fire on a crowded New York subway in Brooklyn back in 2022 and injured 10 people, has been sentenced to 10 life sentences. I alone am responsible for that attack, James said. They in no way deserve to have what happened to them. Wow. I'm shocked that he said that. Once again, excuse me, James Frank has received 10 life sentences for the attack on a New York City subway in Brooklyn back in 2022. Let's finish this commentary pertaining to the Frankies and Miss Hildebrandt. Thank you for joining me. All right, everybody. We are entering live hour 2 of this live stream. I'm going to just recap some of the information that you've heard in the audios pertaining to this very disturbing case out of Utah. As most of you know, Rubi and Jody are incarcerated. They have not put in a plea. We have information that a door was breached at the Springville home, and we now learn that it was the police that breached the door. No one broke into the home. Police documents obtained by ABC4 show Kevin Franke, the estranged husband of YouTube mother accused of child abuse. Rubi Franke wanted to charge his daughter with burglary in early September. Documents show a Department of Child and Family Services caseworker returned to Franke's Springville home the day after Rubi and Jody Hildebrandt's arrest in order to get necessary belongings for the 2 Franke children taken into state custody in southern Utah. Items include clothing and personal belongings. The caseworker had asked police to come along in order to keep the peace, as they believe Kevin Franke may have been home and that he may not be cooperative. Now, why would they think he wouldn't be cooperative? See, this is why I was telling you to always listen to the information. When officers arrived at the Springville home, they found the caseworker, Frankie's eldest daughter, Sherry, and other family members had already entered the home. Officers told the group they were only there to keep the peace and were not going to get involved in property disputes. Officers also reportedly told them to only take what they needed and leave behind anything that did not belong to them. A few days later, Kevin Franke called Springville Police Department reporting a burglary at the home. Franke said the door had been kicked in, damaged, and several electronic journals were missing. He reportedly told police he believes Sherry was to blame. I explained to Kevin that the door was breached when Springville Police Department served a warrant on the home earlier that were looking for juveniles. How in the hell is it that this man would not assume the police were the ones that broke the damn door? Your children are in the state's custody. They were in separate homes. You already had talked to Rubi on the phone about the children's situation, so you couldn't use deduction that the police served a warrant and broke the door, sir. But yet you want to blame your daughter, and now your lawyer wants to double back and say, no, it ain't like that, and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah, it is like that. Yeah, it is like that. I believe you wanted to file charges against your daughter because you were probably upset that the children were in her custody and not you. But you've been gone a year, sir. So why would the state give the children to you? Lord have mercy. These people are unbelievable. Once again, they explained to him that the police broke the door, social workers, in search for the juveniles. I also explained to him that we conducted a keep the peace call with Sherry at the home because she needed to retrieve essential items for the children. Kevin, who reportedly admitted to not having been in the home for over a year, said Sherry was not allowed to go into the house. Why not? Why would your oldest daughter not be allowed to go in the house? You're just now getting information that your children were separated, 2 abused in the hospital, 2 left alone in Springville, and the only thing you can tell a social worker is, oh, Sherry wasn't supposed to go in there. Why not? Why would Sherry not have been allowed in the Springville home? Oh, that's right. Sherry and Rubi weren't speaking. Why not? Why were they not speaking, Kevin? See, Kevin, you're telling on yourself and you don't even realize that you're doing so. You gave the DHS workers ammunition when you said, she's not supposed to go in there. And if I was a worker, I surely would have asked, why not? She's the daughter. Why not? Please elaborate, Mr. Frankie. Why was your daughter not allowed to go in the house? Oh, that's because nobody's talking to her. Mommy's cut her off because Sherry's eyes became wide open and realized what type of crazy nonsense she's been raised in, and she went her separate way. That's why. These are just nuts. Okay. Police reached out to Sherry, who confirmed she took the electronics, but was happy to return them upon request. Police said Sherry didn't have any intent to deprive Kevin of the items, so they wouldn't be pressing charges against Sherry. After the call, Sherry reportedly gave police 3 tablets, 3 cell phones, 3 cameras, a stack of written journals, and 3 passports, all of which were returned to Kevin without incident. Police reporter explained to Kevin that criminal charges would not be filed in the case and that it would be considered a civil issue. So once again, Mr. Attorney, why would the media have this information? Because obviously Kevin did speak to the police about trying to file charges against his own child. And now you all are trying to retract the information. Why? This is what I don't understand about you people. Your client does something stupid. You get wind of it. The media gets wind of it. Now you want to try to retract what was said and done. Now you want to say, oh, he's trying to work on his relationship with Sherry. Why would she even attempt to work on anything with these people? Because in the end, Sherry can give the testament of what her life was like growing up with these people. And I don't think they're going to be just great stories to tell. Because the fact that she's not talking to her mother should tell you something. And I'm going to bet she hadn't been talking to Kevin either. Because if she and Kevin had been talking, why would he want to file charges against her because of some things taken out of the house when she was allowed to take things out of the house. And she probably took passports and all that to make sure don't nobody try to jump on no damn airplane to avoid justice. Kudos if that's why she did take the damn passports. Hell yeah, take them. Because we have judges who don't mind giving a bond, high bond or bail, and it would be sad these people get bonded out, bailed out. If the judge decides to give a high bail and they find a way to get out of jail, who's to say? They don't run. You don't know. You can't say what a person will and won't do. This is so sickening to me. Okay, here we go. Now, Sherry has returned these items, okay, without incident. Police report explaining to Kevin that criminal charges would not be filed in the case and that it would be considered a civil issue. So now what are we saying? That the police made this up? So now what are we saying? The police, they're liars. They made this story up. So this is what amazes me about people. They do stuff that they know is foul and rank, and then they want to act like they're appalled when the information gets out to the public, and then they want to try to retract what they did and try to make it seem like, oh, well, I made a mistake and I was thinking something else. The police has no reason to lie about holding a conversation with Mr. Kevin about stolen items and telling him that it's a civil matter. How would this conversation even come about unless he was saying he wanted to file charges against his own child? Come on now. Kevin was displeased with this answer and advised that he would be hearing from his attorney. Yes, of course, says the officer. Kevin Franke is currently fighting for custody of the children, having appeared for a pretrial hearing at Provo Juvenile Court in September. The hearing scheduled a pretrial date for Tuesday, October 17th, in person, and a mediation set just days prior on October 11th. Ruby, Frankie, and Frankie-Hildebrandt await a date for their next hearing. The case was postponed until an undetermined date after Thursday, October 5th, in order to give attorneys, the article jumped off of there. One second. A time to review the copious amounts of discovery. No date has been set for the hearing for both Ruby Franke and Frankie-Hildebrandt, and they are still being held in jail. ABC4 is the source. All of this is disturbing to me, that this man will try to file charges against his own child and then take it back using this lawyer who is just a brilliant mouthpiece. Oh, no, it ain't like that. Neither of that happened. Oh, it had to have happened because I'm not about to sit here and say, we're not getting ready to blame anybody else because this blame game has gotten old. We're blaming Jody for why Ruby acts the way she acts. We're blaming Jody for how Kevin responded to the marriage and leaving the house. Now he wants to blame the police, her, this and that. Everybody wants to blame somebody instead of owning their part in this storyline. You all are the problems, Ruby, Kevin. Whatever the hell was going on in your marriage, you all had problems before Jody even entered the storyline. See, I always tell people, stick to what's relevant. And the relevance is that you all were jacked up before Jody even came along. But see, evil attracts evil. That's why you got all this extra stuff adding on, new people in the story, because evil has tentacles. The devil reaches out. He uses people. And that's what happened here. Jacked up mother, jacked up father, jacked up marriage, tyrant parents. Both are obviously tainted, hurt, traumatized. Now they're exacting this on their kids. Kids are miserable as hell. Children not speaking to their parents once they leave the damn house. Haven't heard anything about the other older child, I believe, that's left the house. So it's just one thing begetting another. Ruby gets in cahoots with this lady Now she's allowing this lady to abuse her children. Children separated in different houses, abused. Neighbors making complaints to DHS. Podcasts up, podcasts down. Complaints from old podcasts. Nothing done by the state. This is just a vicious, vicious cycle of abuse. And nobody wanted to stand account. And then you have the mother arrested. All she wants to do is talk about one of the children molesting another child. Do you see what I'm saying? These people are evenly yoked. Ruby wants to blame a child while locked up. The husband now wants to blame the older child for stealing stuff out of the house when you've been gone a whole year. That stuff could have been in the river for all you knew. What do you care? You care about a passport, electronics, phones, iPads? Who cares? You've been gone a whole year. Your wife could have actually had a whole nother human being in that house playing daddy, and you would have never known. And you're sitting here worrying about a damn iPad and a passport. See, these people are showing you where their priorities are. They're self-absorbed. They're self-entitled. You've been gone from the house a whole year, and then all of a sudden you get a call about abuse and this and that, and then you walk up acting like the big hero, and you're worrying about a door, which common sense should have told you the police broke the door, and oh, there's a few things missing, but I'm really not sure what's missing. Well, if you weren't sure what was missing a few weeks ago, why did we now get information you were trying to press charges against your daughter? Make it make sense. Make this make sense. Oh, I really don't know what's missing. But now we're getting wind while this was going on. You're trying to press charges against your eldest child because you're mad and you're angry and you didn't want that girl to get custody of those kids. And you don't know what else she could have found that would be evidentiary of neglect from you and your wife. That's what you're worried about. The truth. You're worried about the truth coming out. But see, you can't explain 1 year being gone from this house and your kids. You can't logically explain it. You can use that lawyer as a mouthpiece till you are blue in the face. Anybody with some sense knows you are just as complicit to this storyline as Ruby and Jody, point blank. Let's get some more information, you guys. Thank you for joining me. This is just, oh Lord, it just doesn't stop. With I just don't understand what is wrong with these people. They make my stomach hurt. Let's see what the Daily Mail has to say about these heathens. The estranged husband says he's only seen the alleged child abuser 4 times since their marital split last year. Ruby 41 gained notoriety for her parenting Channel 8 passengers, arrested along with her business partner, 54, Jody Hildebrandt, August 30th. Both facing 6 counts of felony child abuse. Kevin now claims he only learned of his family's whereabouts when his wife was arrested and 2 youngest kids, 10-year-old Eve and 12-year-old Russell, were in the hospital. So I'm going to say that again to iterate my point. Kevin allegedly claims he only learned of his family's whereabouts when she was arrested and the 2 youngest kids were in the hospital. That goes to my point of why in the world are you worried about what the fuck was took out of the house when you have not spoken with this lady or kids? Video, chat, Skype, talk, visit, nothing. And when all hell broke loose, you're worried about what the hell was taken out of there. Okay. The police alleged that Mr. Russell, the son, was held to the ground with ropes while the women rubbed cayenne pepper honey into his wounds. He escaped through a window and ran to get help before the pair were arrested. In the weeks following, videos circulated. Ruby gleefully spoke about forcing her son to sleep on a beanbag as punishment and refusing to bring her daughter to school lunch after she forgot to pack it herself. Kevin, 44, heard infrequently from his wife after Jody, then their marriage counselor, came into their lives and was shocked by the circumstances surrounding her arrest. Kevin was shocked, says the lawyer Randy Kester. It was at that point that he realized how deceived he had been. And in this article, this is where you see the two on the boat, Jody and Ruby, looking very happy together. The internet famous couple, known for their vlog following their daily lives with their 6 kids, and at its height espoused parental advice to some 2.5 million subscribers, separated a year prior to Ruby's arrest. Kevin and Ruby started seeing Jody in 2021. Jody, who was divorced and estranged from her own children, claimed to specialize in sex addiction, but had been reprimanded by the state in 2012 for having an inappropriate relationship with a client. That same year, Jody founded Connections, a program promising to help you flourish in your relationships. The website reads, transform your pain into joy, choose the life you want to have, and exchange your confusion for clarity, and offers a one-on-one session at $181 each. A year later, following a trip with Jody and another counselor, Ruby told Kevin that his attitude was infesting the family, Kester said, and that the only way for them to save their marriage was to separate. Kevin moved out in July of 2022 while continuing to attend weekly sessions with Jody. Now, that's new information that we are learning. That while he has left the house, he was talking to Jody in counseling sessions. Well, so when was the last time he spoke to Jody in a counseling session? I'd like to know. Before the arrest. He lived in a townhouse near the family home, and a counselor from Connections stayed with him and supervised him. Are you hearing this? Are you all hearing this? He moved out, lived near the family home, and had a Connections. Oh, wow. Connections. I don't know how to word it. Counselor stayed with him and supervised him. This goes back to what the niece was saying about this Pam Botcher lady hanging around, watching her and the other children or whatever while they're being abused, although she says the woman never directly abused her. So this is the same thing. Now we've got adults staying in his own separate house from his wife and kids, and a Connections counselor staying with him. Why? Why would you allow another person to stay in your house? If you're having counseling sessions with Jody one-on-one, why do you need another counselor to stay in your separate townhouse? See, make this make sense. These people are so easily manipulated by anybody pertaining to that Mormon faith and church. I want to throw that in there too, because there's something sinister about this Mormon faith. This is all bullshit. You move out, probably from the guys, from Jody, but the point still is your wife went along with it. And then you got another person staying in the house still associated with this Connections group company. Why would you sign up for that, Kevin Frankie? Are you this easily manipulated? This is what I don't understand. This man acts like he's a damn zombie. Okay. Their son Chad moved out with them, but Jody ordered them to separate, claiming they were enabling one another, Kester said. Jody commanded that Kevin cut off communications with most people and talk only to Ruby if she reached out first. So here we have Jody, the orchestrator, the ringleader, the head knocker, telling Kevin to cut off people and only talk to Ruby if she reached out first. So basically, she's telling him, hey, don't call your wife, don't check on your children, just wait for her to call you first. This is bullshit. In the year that followed, Ruby was only allowed to contact Kevin 3 or 4 times. Social workers investigated the couple in June 2020 when concern was raised over troubling YouTube videos. Utah's Division of Child and Family Services couldn't substantiate the abuse allegations. Ruby traveled back and forth between Springfield and staying with Jody and Ivins, where they were later arrested. Social workers and police listed several times in response to calls from a neighbor and the Franks' estranged daughter, Sherry. Ruby and Jody are being held without bail at the Washington County Purgatory Correctional Facility. Neither has entered a plea. Kevin has been questioned by police, but has not been charged, his lawyer says. And in this article, you have all these pictures of Ruby and Jody sitting on a sofa, Ruby holding an infant child. This is just baffling. Ruby's sister-in-law, Jennifer Frank, told the Daily Mail last month that many family members were suspicious of Ruby's business partner. From what I understand, Ruby really started to change when she became mixed up with Jody Hildebrandt. A lot of the family started to believe that Ruby and Jody may have more than a professional relationship. Bingo card. Finally, somebody has said it. I've asked you this question on my community board. Please take the polls that I've posted pertaining to this storyline of Frankie, and Hildebrandt. Was there a romantic relationship between Ruby and Jody? Before their arrest, both women were criticized for their parenting advice as they collaborated on connections. Jennifer said the family heard that Jody moved into the Frankie family home between 21 and 22. So then we got back and forth here. So in 2022, we got Jody living in the Frankie home. And then at the time of this kidnapping of children living in different houses, they're arrested down in Ivins at Jody's house with the two children emaciated. Very interesting. It was a cult, she said. Kevin was in a men's group at Connections. He had a checklist of what he needed to do to be better. And if you did, they would praise you. And if you didn't, they would chastise you. She revealed that one of the first things Jody did when she moved into the family's home was separate the couple. So that means she moved in the house. What? While they were there, or they were already separated? I'd like to know. Ruby was living on one side of the house and Kevin was living on the other. Bingo card. Wow. The plot thickens. Kevin couldn't talk to Ruby unless Jody was present, she said. 20-year-old Sherry, the oldest Frankie child, told Jennifer that she wasn't permitted to speak to her father. Interesting. Sherry told us that Kevin was kicked out last July 22. At the time, we never knew about Jody and the influence she would have on the family, she said. So who told Sherry she couldn't speak to her father? Ruby or Jody or both? Sherry says Daddy was kicked out last July. Sherry explained that Kevin wouldn't take phone calls or answer emails, and that Ruby and Judy had Kevin believing she is a bad person. So now you see, as I keep saying, this is a vicious cycle of manipulation and coercion. Everybody's in somebody's ear about another person. He's bad, she's bad, she's bad. Jody's telling her husband's bad. They're telling Sherry don't talk to the father. Are you seeing what's going on here? Now you fast forward, the father wanted to press charges over some stupid stuff that they took out of the house. Everybody easily manipulated by another human being. This story is wicked. Jennifer said, Sherry tried contacting her father after he moved out, but he blocked everyone on social media, his cell phone, email. I feel bad for Kevin. He's like almost brainwashed. I feel sorry for him. After Ruby's arrest, Jennifer's husband phoned Kevin and offered support. Gaslighting is real. This is messed up, Kevin responded. In some ways, I think Kevin, to an extent, is also a victim. He was always the more nurturing one in the relationship, Jennifer said. I keep asking myself, why didn't Kevin go back for his children? I have to believe none of us know the entire story. The Daily Mail is the source. Well, Jennifer, I want to say this to you. You can live in a bubble if you like and pick sides of who you think is right and wrong. But if you're questioning why he didn't go back for his children, then your answer is already sitting in front of you. He is also complicit. All of these people played a role in the abuse and neglect of the children, first and foremost. All this wrangling around trying to pit this one against this one. This is what was going on with Jody. Jody was trying to isolate Ruby from everybody. How could you not see that? 4 children were found in different places. Sherry wasn't talking to her father or her mother. What is it that you don't understand about the storyline? My understanding is that Ruby had already cut family members off way before this boy crawled out of a window to safety. This has been going on in this family. You all have been dysfunctional. You all have been not talking and speaking way before this debacle here. You know this. You know your sister cut you all off a while ago because she was immersed in this Hildebrandt cult. That woman was slowly winding her up like a doll, and she fell for it. And even if she had never met Jody, let me make this clear in this live stream, she still was diabolical and evil in the way she was rearing her children. You see, one thing begets another. That's what this story is about. Evil has tentacles, and it reached out to 1, to 2, to 3, to 4, and it just latched on to anybody with a pulse. All of these people are jacked up. The Frankies were jacked up before they met Jody. Jody gets tied up with Ruby, vice versa. Now we got abusive children, clients. It's just an evil circle, that's all. And now everybody's looking for somebody to blame. What's going to be interesting is who's going to blame who when it's time to go to court and trial. Because you already got a woman blaming her children as a child molester. So what else is she going to say when she go to court? Is she going to make up stories about her husband abusing her mentally, physically, sexually? What? Is she going to also turn on her girlfriend, Jody? What is Jody's defense going to be? Because really, she's an outsider. And we've learned when it comes to going to court, it's survival of the fittest. I got to do what I got to do to get out this mess. Now, sometimes they will still ride the ride and be quiet and just let their lawyers do all the talking. But if you have any sense, in this case of 6 counts of abusing a child, you better sing like a damn canary. You better try to lay your knees on the court, ask for mercy. You need to ask for mercy. In the past year, Kevin had only heard sporadically from his estranged wife. One of the many things that had changed after their marriage counselor, Jody Hildebrandt, got involved in their lives, Kevin's lawyer, Randy Kester, tells People in the latest issue. Kevin was shocked of the allegations against Ruby and Jody, who are each charged with 6 counts of aggravated felony child abuse. It was at that point that he realized how deceived he had been. They started seeing this crazy bat in 2021 who specialized in sex addiction. I think I've repeated most of this information. Her website Connections was to help you flourish in your relationships, which offered marital and parenting counseling to dispose of distortion, ugly lies in order to live in truth, connection, and freedom. Once again, after a trip that Jody went on with Jody and another counselor, Ruby told Kevin that his attitude is infesting the family, and the only way to save the marriage was to separate. Still attending multiple classes weekly with Jody, Kevin soon moved out. Their son Chad joined him. But Jody, who was also counseling Kevin, ordered them to separate, claiming they were enabling one another. At Jody's direction, Kevin cut off communication with nearly everyone in his life and was only permitted to talk to Ruby if she reached out. See, this right here makes no sense. You take direction from this woman, move out, allow another person from this Connections cult to stay in your house. What did the other people in your family have to do with what was going on with your marriage? That's what I don't understand. Why would you cut off everybody else? You cut off your wife, your kids, and everybody else. So what were you doing for income, Mr. Frankie? Did you go to work? Did you play? Do you drink? What do you do? Do you go to sporting events? What have you done in the past year of living apart from your wife and family? Have you engaged in other relationships with women, men? I'd like to know because, as the sister says, I believe there's more to this story. I believe there's more to the story. There's always going to be more. I believe everybody's going to start blaming the other one, which that's what you're hearing right now. Everybody wants to blame Jody. But these people, as I said, were already jacked up before she came into the picture. Rubi was only allowed to contact Kevin 3 or 4 times in the year. Why? Kevin had been unaware of the abuse of his children allegedly endured in his absence. I don't believe that because my understanding, you were still living in that house when the boy was sleeping on a bean bag. A little girl was reprimanded for not packing a lunch. Children standing in line like little army men and women just to get a banana. All that was going on while you were married and living in that house, Mr. Kevin Franke. Now, the incident about the little boy and on the bean bag and the 6-year-old Evie and the withholding of lunch and the prank of one of the children led to an investigation, but the Utah's Division of Child and Family Services were not able to substantiate those allegations. Rubi alternated between Springville and staying with Jody in Ivins, Utah, about 250 miles away, where they were later arrested. Social workers and police came to her door multiple times in response to calls from a neighbor and the Frankie's estranged daughter, Sherry, 20, but made no formal accusations. So whose house were they going to? The Ivins' house? So were they taking trips and going places and the children were left unattended? How would somebody know the children were in there unattended? This is what I've been trying to understand about the story that I'm not getting clarification. Why were neighbors calling and which neighbors were calling? In Ivins or in Springville? Because how would I know what's going on in a house? But they said that the police was going to the house trying to talk to the children or get contact with them, but they wouldn't come to the door. I believe Sherry was the one calling. But they also say neighbors were calling. So what did the neighbors see to warrant calls to either house? I would like clarification on that. Basically, what Child Protective Services told us is we can't do anything until somebody gets hurt, the neighbor says. Exactly. Both are in the Washington County Purgatory Correctional Facility. Neither has entered a plea. Kevin has been questioned by the police, but has not been charged, as I just said earlier. The neighbor who called authorities says Kevin is partly to blame. Was he negligent? 100%, the neighbor says. He decided to leave the house. Exactly. People Magazine is a source. That's kind of, this source is just really iterating over what I've already brought to you all about this storyline. Of course he's to blame. Because you're being manipulated by a stranger that you don't know anything about, telling you first you allow her to move in your house. Then you let her tell you to leave and cut off people. You stupidly cut off everybody under the sun and the moon. Only talk to your wife about 4 times in a year. Never talk to any of your children. Blocked everybody on social media and your phone. All from instructions from a stranger. Ask yourself, how does that make any logical sense? That you would cut off your family because Jody Hildebrandt told you to do so. At no point in your life did you say, why am I listening to this woman? Who is this woman for me to be taking instructions from? I miss my wife. I miss my kids. I love them. I want to see them. I want to be with them. And yet you want to use a lawyer as a mouthpiece to give us information that's unwarranted because I'm an adult and I have enough sense to know you're a grown man and you are easily coerced like your wife was, and so many others who got under the fold and the guise of Jody Hildebrandt. You're not a kid. You're an adult. You allowed this woman to infiltrate your house. I didn't even know that she was living in your house, living on one side of the house. So don't you see, as I have said to you, this has been nothing but musical chairs dealing with these people. She jumped in their house. He leaves. Children separated in different houses. Neighbors calling to report the children unattended. Children emaciated in the hospital. Husband wants to play dumb like he don't know what the fuck's going on. Oh, it's all Jody's fault. No, you're to blame. Ruby's to blame. Jody's to blame. You're all to blame. Nobody gets a pass in this story. Nobody gets a pass. The family, they're probably wondering, why are we being cut off? I haven't done anything to her. So the sister, Jennifer, you have no business taking up for him and saying he's a victim. He is not a victim. He is not a victim. The 6 children were victims. And we have learned that when people start cutting people off, there is usually a reason why. And everybody's entitled to his or her perception of the situation dealing with people. But you all should have been asking yourselves, why are we not talking to our sister? Why are we not seeing the family? Why are we all not getting together? So did you all not have a family dynamic where you got together, celebrated holidays with each other? Because there are videos with the mother in the house at Christmas, Thanksgiving time. So I'm trying to understand what the hell was really going on. But I think I know what was going on. Jody came into the picture, and that's when all hell broke loose. And that's when everybody started getting cut off. Slowly but surely, everybody got cut off. Ruby cut everybody off in the family because she probably was in her feelings anyway about that damn 8 Passengers YouTube channel that went bust. She knew what she was doing was wrong. That's why she stopped posting videos. Because if she felt secure about how she was parenting her kids, she would have never stopped posting to YouTube. Then she meets this demon. See, that's how the devil works. See, the devil, he can't get no sleep. Well, they don't like you on YouTube. Go find something else to get into. And that's where Jody comes in. Then she gets wrapped up with her. The devil sent her too. Because that's his job. He uses people. He uses people. What a mess. This is a diabolical story. I will continue to bring you updates on this story because I'm approaching hour 3. Sorry, my lives are getting so long, but when I bring these multiple stories, they get winded trying to get all the said information out because I try to bring you the latest updates in the YouTube and the Google Q pertaining, and know that every entity that brings you information, every source will not have the same information. Some of these articles have recapped on other information that's eerily similar, but each one has something a little bit different than another entity. You've learned a lot in this commentary pertaining to this storyline. You see that this woman has used her children as little maids. She wanted them to have pain inflicted upon them. 4 children separated, living in different houses in southern and northern Utah. We have a Pam Botcher brought into the storyline. What is her role? Why did Ruby want to call her to get those last 2 children out of Springville? You also heard in the early part of this live stream that the children wanted to go stay with her. So obviously the children must have liked her to want to go with her, didn't fear being unsafe in her custody, but naturally she did not get custody. And the state made the right decision not to give anybody access to those kids but Sherry, the older sister. Naturally, she's a young person. This will be a responsibility for her depending on how long the state will allow the children to stay in her custody. But she probably wanted her brother and sister because she loves him. Mr. Frankie didn't get custody. And I think many of us know why he didn't get custody of the said children, because he was gone. And you can't logically explain in a court of law why you were away from your family for 1 year. The fact that he allowed this woman to infiltrate his house, Jody Hildebrandt, shows you he does not have good reasoning skills, nor does his wife. And they had problems before she entered their lives. That's number one. They were ridiculed by outsiders when they had the 8 Passenger YouTube channel. They were abusing their children before they met Jody Hildebrandt. The devil was mediating all along in the storyline because he was infiltrated with these 2 heathens Kevin and Ruby. And then he reached out his tentacles and grabbed Jody Hildebrandt and brought her into the fold. And she was jacked up, messed up too. Cited repeating client business to Mormon elders, mistreating her own family members. As you heard, this niece running away. You see, all these people have a tainted past and allegations of abuse to children, to others. And I believe there's truth to all of what has been said. I don't believe any of these people were making any of these allegations up. Now we have 2 grown women in jail. No bond, no bail mentioned. Each to appear in court a week or so from now. We will see what the judge will decide on bail, bond, and the custody of the said children. Will a judge allow Sherry to continue to keep the children? What will happen if they do stay in her custody? How will her relationship work with the father? Will the judge allow visitation to the children? Because that's something that has to be decided as well. If the judge decides not to give Mr. Kevin Frankie custody of the children, will the judge allow him to have visitation rights? Will the children want to see their father? Bingo card. Because it ain't just about what Mr. Kevin Frankie wants. What is best for the children? Does he deserve the rights to visitation? No, he does not. Custodial rights? No, he does not. You can go a whole year. You can keep it damn moving altogether. That's my opinion. A lot changes in the life of a child in 1 year. A lot changes in the life of any human in 1 year. Taller, shorter, fatter, you shrink, you get sick. Your ways change, your ideas change. How in the world can you go that long without seeing your family and allegedly you live right nearby? So if you live right nearby, then you possibly passed them in the street, running around, and you just said nothing. Did you ever go by the house, sir, creep by the house, sit outside the house, yearning to go in? And the only thing you can think to do once children have been found abused is worry about what's been taken out of the house. That shows me you are self-absorbed and self-entitled, and you care nothing for your family like your wife didn't care and her cohort, Jody Hildebrandt. I won't doubt that you've been in a relationship with another woman in the year that you've been gone from the house. You're a man, you have needs, you have desires. And one desire you didn't have was reconciling with your family. The fact that you could be easily coerced by another woman tells me a lot about your character and your disposition. You're a coward and you don't have free will to think on your own. And that's dangerous. The fact that Ruby was coerced, also dangerous. Because these children were depending on you all to take care of them, to guide them. And you all rode the ride and mistreated those children before Jody Hildebrandt ever came to your peripheral. That's fact number 1. You all cutting off family members shows, once again, you do not know how to think for yourselves, that you're easily coerced. Once again, dangerous behavior. Neighbors, people calling the law. Nothing done. And as you hear from police, somebody has to get hurt in order for the state and law enforcement to step in. Well, we've heard that how many times pertaining to child abuse, domestic abuse. Somebody's got to get jacked up for somebody to say, oh, there's a problem. Now imagine had this story unfolded in a different way. Dead children were found. Because I'm going to tell you right now, listen closely now. You want me to believe that those 2 children in Ivans, if they had died from not eating, that Jody and Ruby would have called 911? Hell no. Hell no. See, that was the whole point of cutting everybody off. Is so these 2 lovebirds could go do their little thing and live happily ever after. Had those 2 children died, nobody would have ever known about them. The only person that would have been pushing for justice would have been Sherry. The husband would have stupidly been living off in the wind some damn where in his own damn bubble. And we would have had to see how long it would have taken for law enforcement to go knock on the door to say, hey, where are your children? Because as they said, we've already done this. Banging on the door, nobody would come to the door. It's only because the little boy escaped that the story got out to the public. Stay woke. Had nobody escaped, when was it going to be intervention into the house to see what the hell was going on with these children? This is Daybell all over again. The only difference, there were no children deceased. But had those children died, they would have hid the bodies. Nobody could make me believe different. Because if you can cut off all your family members, you can coerce people to cut off their family members, no contact, somebody dies, you ain't calling 911. Thank you for joining me. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $Angie129, Cash App, stickers and chats are always welcome to the live stream. Happy weekend to everybody. Thank you for listening to this content. My movie suggestion of the week was Rust Creek, free in the YouTube queue for your enjoyment. And my weekend suggestion is Sorry Charlie, now playing on Tubi. It is a very diabolical story of a woman who was accosted in her home by a mystery man dressed in a mask. And later, the alleged suspect was apprehended and put into jail. But this young lady believes that they have the wrong guy and that the perpetrator is still free. Did they have the wrong guy? Was her perpetrator still free? Only you will find out. Sorry, Charlie, now playing on Tubi. Thank you so much for your time. Happy weekend, everybody. If you see something, say something. Be a part of the solution, not the problem. Mind the children know that there is no snitch rule when it comes to the safety and preservation of life of a child. You've been listening to the Vault XL. See you later.